Thank you very much. Yes, a big afternoon of football and a huge afternoon when it comes to Formula One, because it's round 6 of the 2022 championship. The sun is beating down unrelentlessly, I have to say, here in Catalonia. It's 36.2 degrees, and at the front of the grid right now with an umbrella, a red Ferrari umbrella emblazoned with the dancing horse, prancing horse logo, is Charles Leclerc. He is the championship leader. He will start from pole position, and just to the right of him, 7 metres back, is his title rival, Max Verstappen, who will try and close that 19-point gap, try and claw his way back towards the lead of this championship and trying to retain his world title. To talk us through the race, we have former F1 mechanic Mark Priestley and our lead commentator Jack Nicholls. And Jack, it's a party atmosphere here, but it's anything but a party for these 20 drivers taking to the grid.
It's going to be a tough afternoon, and an important afternoon as well, because Charles Leclerc is the man leading the championship, 19 points ahead of Max Verstappen. Verstappen is second on the grid, and Verstappen has won the last 2 Grand Prix, so he's the man who needs to get ahead. He needs to take the win, and if he wants to keep closing down that gap at the top of the championship.
It's a long, relatively long stretch down to the first turn, almost 600 metres, one of the longest ones that we have of the season. And Mark, the start is going to be so crucial for these drivers, and everybody will want to make up ground fast today, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. A really big opportunity. The biggest and most obvious opportunity to make up places, of course, at the start of the race. They've all been doing practice starts from the grid at the end of every single session this weekend, just to get a learning, get an understanding of what their car is going to do when they finally drop the clutch as the lights go out. But it's really important. Last year, of course, we saw Verstappen going wheel to wheel with Hamilton into turn 1. A really tight move, but a move that really enabled Max Verstappen to go on and dominate that race. So it's all important. It's a long run. The very fast car that Max Verstappen has underneath him will surely come into play as they head down the hill towards turn 1.
Well, 28 of the 31 races here in Spain have been won from the front row, and the last 5 have been won by Lewis Hamilton. He starts in P6. Fernando Alonso starting right at the back, having taken a new power unit. So 30 seconds on the clock until the formation lap. Let's hand over to our commentary team.
This is going to be a very, very interesting Grand Prix. There's 2 stops, potentially 3 stop strategies, depending on how the track unfolds, because it is so warm in Barcelona right now. Leclerc on pole position, Verstappen alongside him. The sprint down to turn 1 as well is going to be interesting, because Leclerc will have the outside line, but Verstappen will have the inside line on the way into the first corner. But Verstappen will be starting ever so slightly behind. Big afternoon of football, but first up, it's 2 o'clock here on BBC Radio 5 Live. This is the Spanish Grand Prix. Cars going round then on their formation lap, and Charles Leclerc is leading at the front of the field. Max Verstappen will start second on the grid. Carlos Sainz third in the Ferrari. 4th is George Russell in the Mercedes. 5th, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, with Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes in 6th. Valtteri Bottas, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo and Mick Schumacher complete the top 10. Then it's Norris, Ocon, Tsunoda, Gasly and Zhou, the top 15. Vettel, Stroll, Albon, Latifi and Alonso, the 20 drivers. So, all of the drivers starting on the soft tyre, except for Lewis Hamilton, who is starting on the mediums.
Interesting choice, isn't it? It's going to be a race of attrition, both for the drivers, but also it really is going to be a race of keeping these tyres alive. So a little bit of a longer stint, perhaps, for Lewis Hamilton in the first part of this race.
So the cars are now halfway around the lap. The big overtaking opportunity is going to be down into turn 1. There's also an opportunity into turn 10. A reminder that 19 points is the gap at the top of the championship. Leclerc ahead of Verstappen. It's 25 points for a race victory. They're now coming around the top part of the circuit, which is all a sea of orange in the grandstands, and Max Verstappen fans who are applauding him as he makes his way past and down towards the start grid again. Max Verstappen, the reigning champion. 66 laps of racing coming up. It'll take about an hour and a half. We'll be breaking away on 5 Live in about an hour for all the team news ahead of the final day of the Premier League season, and then in 2 hours, of course, the matches will be kicking off. We will have uninterrupted coverage on 5 Live Sports Extra, and on the BBC Sport website as well. But now the cars are pulling into their grid slots, Jenny Gow.
They certainly are, and it's worth noting that Charles Leclerc not only is starting on the soft, but he is starting on a new set of soft tyres. How important could that be in the run down to turn 1?
That'll give him a bit more purchase off the line, won't it, compared to Max Verstappen, who starts second.
Really will. Could be very, very important as this race gets underway. So a new soft tyre will give you 3 or 4, maybe even up to 6 or 7 metres of better launch off the line, and that could literally be the difference between getting down into turn 1 first.
Fernando Alonso is starting at the back of the grid. After they changed a lot of parts in the Alpine yesterday after a difficult qualifying session for him, and now the final cars are pulling into position. Alonso at his home Grand Prix will line up at the back. His compatriot Carlos Sainz, the other home hero, starting third on the grid. How the fans would love to see him on the podium. But now all the cars are in place. The 6th round of the Formula 1 World Championship coming up here on 5 Live. Leclerc, the championship leader, is on pole position. Verstappen, second in the championship, is alongside him. The race begins now in Barcelona, and it's a pretty slow start from Carlos Sainz, but Verstappen has got away well. He's going to pull up alongside Leclerc coming into turn 1, but Leclerc comes over, covers the inside. Verstappen now goes to the outside into the first corner, but Leclerc in the Ferrari holds the lead of the race. There's contact with George Russell and Sergio Perez. Sainz drops down the field. Russell manages to keep going, and Sainz has now dropped behind Lewis Hamilton as well as they come through turn 3. So it's Leclerc in the lead, Verstappen second, George Russell up to third, Sergio Perez in 4th. Sainz has gone from 5th down to 3rd, and there's contact between Hamilton and Magnussen, and Kevin Magnussen in the Haas is spat out into the gravel, and he should be able to keep going because he thinks he's just got enough momentum. No, I think he's grinding to a halt, but Hamilton has maybe picked up damage after that contact too. They were wheel to wheel coming into the left-hander. Hamilton has damage. He's dropping to the back of the pack, maybe a front left puncture, but Charles Leclerc leads the way.
Disaster for Lewis Hamilton after such a promising weekend, but up at the front his teammate George Russell with a blistering start. I think the contact actually was between Perez and Sainz. Both of them seem to have got away with it at this stage, but what a disappointing start to this race for Lewis Hamilton.
He's going to have to come into the pits here. I think he's got a front left puncture by the looks of it, Lewis Hamilton. He can barely get the car stopped. He was side by side with Carlos Sainz, and then Kevin Magnussen came to his outside, and Hamilton just the tiniest of bits of contact, and that sent Magnussen off into the gravel. He did manage to keep going, and it gave him the puncture. Out across the line at the end of lap 1, Charles Leclerc leads, Max Verstappen is second, George Russell is third in the Mercedes, then it's 4th for Sergio Perez, 5th for Carlos Sainz, 6th is Mick Schumacher in the Haas. He started 10th on the grid, and he's already managed to move up into 6th position. Bottas 7th, Ricciardo 8th, Ocon 9th, Lando Norris 10th. Jenny?
Yeah, just thinking about Lewis Hamilton, he's come into the pit lane, I believe. It's slightly out of my view, but he started on those medium tyres, a new set. It's thrown his strategy into total disarray. He is in the pits, he's really struggling. They can't lift the car, they've finally done it, putting him on another set of the soft tyres, but it's a really slow stop, and right now he is released, just flashes past me in the Silver Arrow. Disappointing start, as you say. The luck this week this year isn't going his way, and Magnussen comes in as well, front right puncture.
Fernando Alonso has made up 5 places and is up into 15th position, so Hamilton and Magnussen in the pits, and as you say, he was the only driver who was going to start on the medium tyre and try and go long into the Grand Prix, and then he has to pit straight away anyway.
Yeah, and unlike at some events where at this stage, if that happens, you could have thrown on the hard tyre and potentially tried to one-stop it. The temperatures are so high and this circuit's so demanding on tyres that I don't even think a one-stopper might be possible, even as a massive gamble. And you've seen Lewis Hamilton there go for the soft tyre, which really isn't going to last very long. He's now on the same strategy effectively as the one that everyone else started on, although he's now right at the back of the field. So real disaster for Hamilton. But up at front, it's Leclerc out front with Verstappen still less than a second behind. We don't get DRS for the first 3 laps, so that will be enabled as we come into lap 3 now. That could enable Max Verstappen, still within DRS range of Leclerc, the opportunity to use the pace of his Red Bull to potentially get past. Let's have another look at the start here then. Great start from Leclerc, great start from Verstappen. Perez got a really good launch off the line as well, but was then balked and made that contact with Carlos Sainz, and it was further back that Hamilton came into that disastrous contact with Kevin Magnussen, resulting in that forced pit stop. But it was a really solid start from all of them up at the front end, George Russell particularly.
Yeah, and there was a tap, wasn't there, from the front left of Sergio Perez into the back of Russell. Russell did well to hold it. Verstappen got a better start, better reaction from Leclerc, and I get the feeling that if they had been on the same tyre, Verstappen would have got that, but because his reaction was quicker. Leclerc came across right in front of Verstappen. It was very, very marginal between the pair of them. But in the end, what happened with Sainz? Oh, he just sort of
terrible start.
Didn't get going at all. It's almost like the clutch didn't release almost.
He was very lucky, in fact. It didn't quite go into anti-stall, which then enforces an even longer delay. But he really did struggle to get that thing off the line, and that's cost him a couple of places, both Perez and Russell. And it looked like maybe Perez got tapped front end and back end.
Yeah, and I think that maybe Sainz would have picked up a bit of front wing damage on that, because there was a little bit of contact.
I've been hit.
That was Hamilton's radio from earlier on in the Grand Prix when he had that collision with Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen went to the outside, and there was it's a racing incident for me. Magnussen could have given him more room.
Lewis just rammed me. He knew what he was doing.
I'm not sure I particularly agree with that. Hamilton rammed
racing driver in the heat of the moment.
Don't think he rammed Magnussen off the circuit. But Charles Leclerc leading the Spanish Grand Prix here on BBC Radio 5 Live, and he is 1.2 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. The Ferrari leading the Red Bull. Third is George Russell. Fourth is Sergio Perez. Fifth is Carlos Sainz. Then it is Bottas, Schumacher, Ricciardo, Ocon and Norris, the rest of the top 10. And we will be here with you for the next couple of hours, uninterrupted on Sports Extra, and we'll be jumping back for team news ahead of the 4 o'clock kickoffs of the final day of the Premier League season, which you'll hear live here on 5 Live and also on Sports Extra. Down in the pit lane in Barcelona is Jenny Gao.
Yes, and I'm keeping an eye on these soft tyres, because there's very little information on how long they'll last. The cars are full of fuel at their absolute heaviest right now. So will they go 8 laps, 9, 10? We're expecting them to not go very far, let's put it that way. And if you're on a used set of soft tyres, even less.
In a normal Grand Prix, Mark, you're expecting, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 laps before the first round of pit stops, so 8 or 9 is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and the temperatures only make that worse. We heard Ferrari on Friday during all of their long runs complaining about how the soft tyre was performing, how it's degrading faster than they would have liked, and that really will come into play here. Leclerc out front at the moment, but just teetering around the DRS gap to Max Verstappen. DRS now enabled, of course, in this race. He's just around 1.1 seconds in front. But if Verstappen can stay there with a better case of handling on those tyres,
I would save this engine, guys, if I was you. Sorry.
Lewis, we still think we can achieve points here today, so P8 may be better.
So that's Hamilton saying, let's just retire and save the engine and get an early flight home.
Yeah.
The team saying, well, we reckon 8th place is doable, which from second to last, where Hamilton is currently in 19th place, that would be quite a reasonable achievement.
Yeah, it really would.
Valtteri Bottas has overtaken Mick Schumacher and got up into 6th place, and Esteban Ocon in the Alpine has overtaken Daniel Ricciardo and got into 9th position. Lap 5 of 66. Leclerc's lead 1.2 seconds up at the front. They're only 2.4 seconds ahead of George Russell, so they're not pulling away exceptionally quickly.
What I was just going to say about the Ferrari tyre situation, given that they tend to be able to look after their tyres just a little bit better than the Red Bull can, we may well see this really come into play around this first phase of pit stops. Jenny said there, we're talking about from lap 8 onwards, we might see the first stoppers, and may well be that Ferrari are in that bunch that have to bring their car in early. And if that's the case, and if Verstappen can stay in touch, he might be able to run just a little bit longer. A few laps may do it with a clear track in front of him and enable him to come out in front once the pit stops shake out. So that's an interesting strategy element to keep an eye on.
Mick Schumacher has now got up into, or has dropped behind Esteban Ocon as well. So Ocon in 7th, Schumacher 8th, Ricciardo 9th, Norris is 10th. So Ocon is dropping down the order a little bit. Jenny.
So Norris, he started this race feeling pretty unwell. He has been checked out by the doctors and they've declared him fit to race, but he was shivering, his eyes were streaming. If he can finish this race and finish in the points, it will be a thing of, I don't know, it'll be almost miraculous, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, well, he's running in 10th place at the moment, behind Daniel Ricciardo in 9th position. They're starting to climb the hill now up towards the quick right-hander at turn 9 at the top of the hill. Fernando Alonso is on the back of Sebastian Vettel, trying to get ahead of him. Leclerc's built his and pulled his lead up now to 1.6 seconds over Max Verstappen in second.
I just wonder if that's the beginning of this early tyre stop strategy that they may be looking for here, because if they are going to pull Charles Leclerc in early, they will need to start building a gap. So it may be that we're starting to see some hot laps from Leclerc coming in now, just to edge the gap out a little bit, to give him a little bit of a buffer, so that when he does pull into the pits, he's got a slight gap behind. 1.6 seconds now to Verstappen. That could just be the difference between him staying ahead once they all shake out the pit stops.
Here comes Fernando Alonso on the back of Sebastian Vettel. The fight for 13th place as they come down in towards turn 1. Vettel goes to the inside. Alonso almost 2 wheels on the grass as he gets ahead of Vettel. The Spanish crowd like it, and Alonso is through up into 13th position. There's a yellow flag out because Sainz is off. Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari has gone off at turn 4. Now, he was running all by himself. He's ended up in the gravel trap. He rejoins the circuit now and drops down into 12th position, 13th position, now wheel to wheel with Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. And Tsunoda gets through because Sainz's tyres are all covered in gravel and dirt. And we'll find out what happened to him, but he kind of seemingly just by himself has slid wide. Not the home race he was hoping for.
No, and if that is the case, it's not the first time that's happened this season. We're going to get a replay now, but off the back of that, his tyres are absolutely destroyed. So coming in, it's a big, lost it on his own, in the braking zone. He just swapped ends as he got on the brakes and turned in. So, yeah, I mean, it looks like, unless there's some mechanical error there. Let's hear from him.
No damage, just the tyres, check the tyres. Happy to keep going.
So no damage, but check the tyres, he says. He says he's happy to keep going, but it just depends how badly flat-spotted those tyres are after the spin.
And that radio message would strongly suggest that's a driver error, because if there was something more to it, he'd be much more concerned about the car itself. So that's a real shame for Carlos.
Lap 8 of 66, Charles Leclerc leading the Grand Prix, 1.8 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen. And then it's 6.7 seconds back to George Russell in third place. The Mercedes driver is under big pressure now from Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. There's less than a second between them. Russell running in third, Perez in fourth. And he'd be very keen, I think, for a podium finish here, Sergio Perez, but so would George Russell. He has had one already this year, earlier in the season in Melbourne, but that was after Verstappen and Sainz both retired. But he's doing a decent job today, Russell, and especially if he can stay ahead of Perez on pace. Bottas is 5th in the Alfa Romeo, Ocon is 6th in the Alpine, Schumacher, Ricciardo, Norris and Yuki Tsunoda are the rest of the top 10. Carlos Sainz, after that spin, has emerged in 11th position. Then it's Gasly, Alonso, Vettel, Zhou, the top 15, Stroll, Albon, Latifi, Hamilton, Magnussen, the 20 runners. Up at the front, it is some good pace coming in from Leclerc. He's putting another good lap in, and this is where we're getting into, we've touched on it briefly already, but that sort of undercut phase, and at what point who's going to blink first, really, in the first round of pit stops. Here comes Sergio Perez on the back of George Russell. He's closing in on the Mercedes driver as they come down the start-finish straight. The fight for third place. Russell is holding it at the moment. Last minute comes over and covers the inside, but he's able to hold on to that third spot for the moment. This is a good fight, though, for third position between the Mercedes and the Red Bull. Fernando Alonso is on the back of Pierre Gasly. They're fighting over 12th place, and this should be a straightforward move for Alonso. He goes to the outside. Verstappen's in the gravel. Max Verstappen from second place has made a mistake and has spun out of second position. The reigning champion has dropped back down to fourth. He's back on the road, but he's down in fourth place. Exactly the same corner that Carlos Sainz made that error a few laps ago. Verstappen looks like he's done the same. What a rare, unforced error from Max Verstappen.
And that's an absolute gift from for Charles Leclerc. He's been trying to build that lead in case he needs to make the early pit stop. Now he's got a huge gap behind, 8 seconds to George Russell, enable him to make that pit stop without much threat. And this is, Verstappen's exactly the same kind of accident. A spin, under braking, just lost the rear end, off into the gravel, manages to find his way through and back onto the circuit, but he comes back out in fourth place.
As a large gust entry turn 4 there, Max.
So talking about wind there, strong gust of wind, which can have a massive impact on the way these cars perform, and maybe it's that's caught him out.
Newport Pagnell Town have beaten Littlehampton Town 3-0 at Wembley in order to win the FA Vase. Now George Russell is under double attack here in the Spanish Grand Prix. We're on lap 10 of 66, and Leclerc is leading. Second is George Russell. Third is Sergio Perez. Perez trying to go around the outside of Russell into the first corner, but he's able to hold him off for the moment. So Russell in the Mercedes doing a tremendous job to be there in second position as they come now through turn 3 and down towards turn 4. It's also going to be interesting to see what will happen with Verstappen behind, and how quickly Verstappen will just move out of the way, Perez will just move out of the way of Verstappen and allow him to overtake quickly. As we're on lap 10 of 66, down in towards the right-hander. We've also had Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo switch positions. Jenny.
Yeah, just talking about pit stops. No one coming in yet to make a scheduled pit stop. Of course, Hamilton and Magnussen both coming in after the incident on turn 1. So we're expecting that window to be well and truly open by now. And it's 22 seconds for a pit stop.
Okay, well, those are the gaps then that they need to keep an eye out on. And that's the thing for Leclerc at the moment. Well, the thing for Leclerc now is he's got a 9-second lead over George Russell in second place. Leclerc has got a bit of an open goal. Russell is going to be under big pressure this time as they come out of the slow, tricky left-right at 14 and 15. Russell's got a reasonable advantage, actually, over Perez. Maybe Perez even dropped out of DRS range as they come across the line and down towards turn 1. There's not going to be a move this time from Perez. Russell holds on to second place.
Did a very, very good job, is George Russell, and this could well be a feature of races coming up. Now that we've got the Mercedes in a much better situation, they've got a bit of a handle on their porpoising, this bouncing effect that's been causing them so much trouble. We may well see the Mercedes of Verstappen, of Russell and Hamilton getting in amongst the title contenders here, but at the moment George Russell holding up 2 Red Bulls behind him, with Verstappen getting more and more frustrated, tucked up underneath the rear wing of his teammate.
Lap 11 of 56. Carlos Sainz has pitted and is coming out on the mediums. There's the switch between the Red Bulls then. So Max Verstappen has got ahead of Sergio Perez. Perez, relatively speaking, led him through, and now Verstappen will try and attack George Russell as they come down into the left-hander of turn 10. And how quickly can Verstappen get this job done? Is it? And we've got such a long race to go. It's now 37 degrees. That Verstappen isn't necessarily out of this if he can get ahead of Russell quickly, because the gap will then be 9 seconds.
Yeah, it's definitely not the end of the world, but it does give Leclerc far more strategic options in his favour than he had when he was coming under the pressure of Verstappen early on in this race. If there is a tyre offset between the two, it's now been taken away a little bit by that own goal from Verstappen, as Yuki Tsunoda makes a DRS-enabled move on Daniel Ricciardo, and that is for 9th place.
Yep, so Charles Leclerc leads the Spanish Grand Prix, 10 seconds now ahead of George Russell, and Russell's able to keep Verstappen at bay at the moment.
Why have I got caught car warnings? I've got no one in front of me.
So they're real, alarms are real.
So Russell being told, asking, why have I got cool car warnings? And it's not, this is such a dad joke, it's not saying the car's cool, he's saying that you need to cool the car down. And normally those would happen if there's a car in front of you and you're not getting, because there's no radiators on these cars, so just airflow is all you have to cool them down. If you're stuck behind another car, that tends to happen, but it must just be so hot, the air temperature, that the cars are heating up.
Well, there are radiators, but they're cooled by the airflow passing over the car, and you're right, what happens is when you're tucked up behind a car in front, that airflow is disturbed. The airflow coming off the car in front is hot, it's turbulent, you don't get the same amount through your radiators, so you don't get the same cooling effect, and that's often when you're told to cool the car down, pull out the airstream of the car in front. But Russell currently running around with nobody in front of him, and that might suggest at this early stage of the race, although we know it's very hot, here's Verstappen.
Max, info. The DRS flap did not open last lap. Keep trying.
That's why Verstappen didn't get close to Russell, because the DRS flap didn't open. It's the drag reduction system, the flap in the rear wing, that pings open and gives you more straight line speed down the straight. And again, it doesn't open. Now Verstappen, he might not have been in DRS range that time through. He didn't set a lap yesterday in qualifying, Verstappen, because that flap didn't open and he lost time. So that's not ideal if that's going to make it really difficult to pass George Russell.
Yeah, that's a real blow for Max Verstappen. That's a considerable chunk of lap time and certainly the overtaking opportunity that comes along with DRS. They changed the actuator on that car overnight because they knew they had the problem in qualifying. They were still working on the DRS flap on the grid ahead of the race start with Verstappen's car, so clearly still not happy and clearly still not working. So that's going to really hamper Verstappen, particularly if he can get anywhere near, later in this race, Charles Leclerc. But at the moment, he's just got to get up behind George Russell in the Mercedes.
Into the pits has come Lando Norris, and he has come out just in front of Carlos Sainz. We're getting a few of the midfield runners coming into the pits now. Lap 13 of 66. We will be back for all the Premier League action later on this afternoon here on 5 Live at 4 o'clock. The Man City versus Liverpool title race. But Charles Leclerc is leading in the Ferrari, 10.8 seconds ahead of George Russell, who's in second position. Verstappen is in third. He was in second, just behind Charles Leclerc, until he made a mistake and went off the circuit and then dropped back down into fourth place. Got ahead of his teammate, but now he's got to try and get ahead of George Russell without the assistance of the DRS by the looks of things. So really, really tough times. And Russell pits. Into the pits comes George Russell and also Max Verstappen. So Russell and Verstappen come into the pits at the same time, and that's a really weird decision from Red Bull, that they didn't do the opposite of whatever George Russell did, because now he's just going to be stuck behind Russell still, but on a different set of compound tyres.
I'm really surprised at that, yeah. That would have been the obvious call there, would have been to say to Max Verstappen, do whatever George Russell doesn't do. So if George Russell stays out, you come into the pits. If Russell pits, you stay out, just to give you that slight strategic offset. But they haven't. They've done the same thing. They've gone pit stops that were just 1/10 of a second apart from each other in terms of time, and they emerged from the circuit in pretty much the same situation they went into the pit lane.
Carlos Sainz is up at 9th place. He's just overtaken Lando Norris. Jenny?
Yeah, both Russell and Verstappen stopping at the same time, as you say, and they both went to a new medium tyre, so the yellow banded tyre, and went back out. It was pretty close, actually, of them going out. We've had a lot of close pit stops and a lot of almost unsafe releases, but not quite, so a really messy pit, I would say, down here at the moment.
Yeah, very busy in there, wasn't it? Lap 14 of 66. Charles Leclerc leading, 14.5 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez. Valtteri Bottas is now up to third, but those three have yet to stop. Russell is the first of the drivers who has pitted in fourth position. Verstappen in fifth place, and it's very interesting. It's a different problem. You may remember last year, at the end of last year in Qatar, most noticeably, Red Bull were having problems with their DRS.
Okay, Max, just so you're aware, DRS did work on the in-lap.
Okay, so it did work on one of them. So this is an intermittent problem. Sometimes he can open the rear wing and sometimes he can't, Max Verstappen, as he comes down towards turn one. So that's a positive.
I guess so, yeah. More positive than it never working, I suppose. But it's a bit of a gamble. You just never know when he hits that button what it's going to do. The first thing he needs to do, of course, is get close enough to George Russell to give him that opportunity. Just teetering around the edge of the DRS zone. That's, of course, 1 second behind the car in front. He's currently sitting fifth with Russell in fourth. Valtteri Bottas has just dived into the pit lane from third position to make his first stop, which leaves Perez chasing down Leclerc up front. Neither of those two have made the pit stop, but so far Perez still banging in fastest lap after fastest lap on a set of brand new soft tyres. Don't forget, Charles Leclerc started this race as opposed to the used softs that most others did, and that may just be giving him a slight little advantage in terms of running longer. He's got a massive gap behind him, of course, of 14 seconds, so the pressure is slightly off, but it does open up some slightly better strategic options as the race plays out, being able to run a longer stint now.
Verstappen's got a really good chance here. The DRS did open on the run down towards turn 10, and as a result he's very, very close to the back of the Mercedes of George Russell now. They're battling over third position, which will probably become a net second place. They're coming down into the main start-finish straight now, and Verstappen is very, very quick through there. This is going to be his best opportunity of the race so far to get ahead of George Russell, who he was ahead of previously. No, it doesn't open. So as they came across that time, he pressed the button to open the flap. It opened, but then it slammed back shut again.
Yeah, so frustrating. I mean, he's working so hard behind the wheel. You can see it. He's pushing as hard as he dare in that Red Bull racing car. Gave himself the opportunity to get as close as possible, and then the DRS flap just didn't work as it should. It must be absolutely driving him mad in that car.
Lap 16 of 66. Leclerc leading, Perez second. Neither have stopped. Russell is third, Verstappen is fourth, Bottas is fifth. Jenny Gow. Hang on, here's Verstappen's radio.
DRS did not open.
Yes!
And I think Verstappen's aware that it's not opening, but it is opening at certain points. Let me just have a look. When they come up through turn 9, oh, Verstappen sends it in a bit deep, coming into 8 and 9. Well, we're not going to see it that time around. Jenny.
Yeah, it must be so frustrating. You can hear Max Verstappen in the car sounding irate. This is another technical gremlin. Now, whether this is heat-related, because we've seen a few of the other teams struggling with this across the weekend, I don't know. But it's something that is really going to impinge on Verstappen's chances of trying to close this gap to Leclerc.
Lap 17 of 66 then. Leclerc has been out for 18 laps on those tyres now. Russell in third, Verstappen in fourth, Bottas in fifth. And they're coming now out over the start-finish straight once again. And is the DRS going to open? It does this time. So this time it's working for Verstappen. He's going to get a much more speed coming down into turn 1. Is he going to be close enough to make the move? Russell goes to the inside and Verstappen can't get it done. Russell defends very neat and tidy, but Verstappen's got a very good drive coming through turn 3. Might even fancy a look into turn 4, but just being that close behind the Mercedes meant he couldn't quite keep as close, and Russell holds the place.
George Russell doing a phenomenal job, I have to say, under huge pressure from a very fast Max Verstappen tucked underneath his rear wing. George Russell, of course, not necessarily been in this position very often in his career. Only half a second splits him and the Red Bull of Verstappen right now, but he's doing a very solid job of putting his car and in the wrong places for Verstappen, in the right places for him, making it as wide as possible, and as it stands, holding on to that vital third place.
Lap 17 of 66, well, lap 18 of 66 now for the race leader, Charles Leclerc. And again, it didn't work that time for Verstappen either. It pings open and then it slams shut. It's almost like it's sometimes not strong enough to kind of hold itself open, and the wind that's coming through blows it back shut again, fundamentally.
It could be a sort of the way it's set up. They sort of go over centre, and then it's the hydraulic ram, the hydraulic actuator that has to pull it down closed again, and that's not seemingly holding it open in place as they go along the straight. Sergio Perez now into the pits from second place.
Medium tyres for Sergio Perez. Where's he going to emerge then compared to those around him? Verstappen is closing in again on the back of Russell, and the DRS looks closed at the moment, so there's nothing he can do about it, and this is so frustrating for Red Bull and for Verstappen. Now, has Perez come out ahead? No, he hasn't. Perez is now 8 seconds back from Russell and Verstappen, so that shows you the power of coming out on new tyres, because they were all right together. Sainz has just got ahead of Sebastian Vettel for 7th position. Meanwhile, Vettel is yet to pit. In fact, he's the last person other than Charles Leclerc who has pitted yet. Let's go down to Jenny in the pit lane.
Yeah, just having a look at this DRS. The DRS is worth 0.6 of a second around a lap of this track, and also being behind. Oh, I saw that wiggle, Jack. Oh.
Max Verstappen just had a huge moment. He's having to push almost way beyond the limits in order to try and get close to Russell and overtake him. Do carry on, Jenny.
Yeah, the problem is also that he's behind Russell, and that is at 0.1 of a second.
Well, you can't even make a DRS work, man. Unbelievable.
And it is a mechanical thing, the DRS, which is quite... cars are so sort of technologically advanced these days, it's quite rare for a mechanical thing to not be working.
It's one of the more simple elements on a Formula One car, so I can understand his frustration. Importantly, sorry Jenny, I know you're in the middle of something, but importantly up front, that pit stop from Perez has opened up more than a pit stop gap for Leclerc, so he can now make a free pit stop and still come out back in the lead of this race.
Verstappen still unable to get ahead of George Russell once more, though. Verstappen has got a much better run coming through turn 1 and 2. He then tries to tuck in, but just can't stay close enough through turn 3 because of the dirty air coming from Russell's car. So Russell holds on to second position. Lap 19 of 66. Leclerc leads. We'll see whether he comes into the pits at the end of this lap, but if he's still lapping pretty well, because now that Verstappen is caught behind Russell, Leclerc is still lapping 0.3 of a second a lap quicker than than his main rivals behind, so there's no need for him to come into the pits just yet.
And that will really suit him later on. That will really give him the options. As I said earlier on, it's going to open up a strategic play for him that he might not otherwise have had if he had to stop as early as lap 8, coming under the pressure from Verstappen. So it's really all playing into the hands of Ferrari and Charles Leclerc.
Charles Leclerc, the championship leader, leading round 6 of the Formula 1 World Championship here on BBC Radio 5 Live. We'll be heading back to Mark for team news in like half an hour or so ahead of the final day of the Premier League season.
So Perez is on a 1-stop.
George Russell being told that Sergio Perez is on a one-stop strategy, the Red Bull driver in 4th place, but Verstappen is getting close to the back of Russell again, but doesn't have DRS again. It's not working. The rear flap not opening, and as a result, he's having to sit in behind him. Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic, alongside me, Jack Nicholls and Jenny Gow in the pits, but this is so frustrating for Verstappen.
Well, there was a lot of talk, wasn't there, coming into this 2022 season with the brand new cars intended to enable overtaking a little bit more easily, and all the talk was, do we still need DRS? Can we eventually get rid of DRS? Well, this is a very clear sign that at the moment, the way things stand right now, we can't get rid of DRS because Max Verstappen, very, very frustrated, probably in a slightly faster car, but just cannot get by the very wide Mercedes-Benz of George Russell.
Mick Schumacher has just made a move on Daniel Ricciardo and got up into 12th position. Charles Leclerc is leading the way. Russell 2nd, Verstappen 3rd, Perez 4th, Bottas 5th, Jenny Gow.
Yeah, really key for Leclerc here because they've changed the setup of the Ferrari radio.
Okay, Max, you've got DRS. We are watching Russell, just be careful.
My DRS is not working, mate.
Just look out for Russell because he is moving in the braking zone.
Okay, so that's a bit of a lame radio message.
That's half a message for the FIA. That's what that is. That's as much as it is for Max Verstappen.
Well, let's just see if Verstappen can make a move this time around, because he's very, very close to the back of Russell. 0.6 of a second between them as they come out over the start-finish straight. Let's see what happens with the DRS this time for Verstappen. Had a bit of a slide coming out of turn 15, and he's not able to make the move coming into turn 1. The DRS was open, though, that time. Jenny, carry on, please.
Thank you. Yeah, they've done a lot of setup changes this weekend to that Ferrari to try and enable the car to go longer for it and to not degrade the tyres so much, basically eating them up, which is what they saw on Friday. Ferrari were really impressed, and Red Bull were worried about that coming into this race. So it's really good news on all fronts for Leclerc, who currently leads the championship by 19 points and leads this race as well. And he can go to a one-stop strategy now as well, which is a major plus for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. The pace is starting to drop off a little on that last lap from Leclerc. He was about 0.7 slower than Russell and Verstappen, but his advantage is still 28 seconds ahead of them in the lead of the Grand Prix. So he's got enough time to come into the pits and re-attack, and Leclerc is going to come into the pits this time around. So into the pits he comes now, the Ferrari driver in the pit lane, Jenny.
Yes, he's just coming into the 3rd pit stop, because it'll be Mercedes followed by Red Bull followed by Ferrari. He slots into their gap. They take off those very used soft tyres. On go a new set of the yellow banded medium tyres. Nice slick 2.2 second pit stop for the Ferrari team.
And he's going to come out in front of Russell and Verstappen still, so he resumes the lead of the race here. Charles Leclerc, as he comes out ahead of Russell, ahead of Verstappen. All three have now made a pit stop, but Leclerc has got much fresher tyres at the moment, and Verstappen again is not able to get close to the back of George Russell. So
turning into an absolute dream afternoon for Charles Leclerc so far, with a third of the race gone. Pit stops all done, at least the first ones, and it may well be that it's the only ones we see for a couple of these drivers. Here's Verstappen.
Max, try pressing the DRS after your curbing.
Okay, so that's Verstappen being told, press the DRS button once you've come off the curb on the exit of the corner. There's sort of like, little edges of the track that shake the car up, so maybe they're thinking that could have something to do with it.
Yeah, possibly loose connection somewhere, possibly that setup with the rear wing is just at the point where it's flipping over centre, over the curbs, over the bouncing of the curves, so maybe that's just an option he can try. I think they'll take any option at the moment to try and get past this Mercedes. It's got the DRS as they run down towards turn 10 though. Not enough, not close enough this time, but it just brings him right back up underneath the rear wing of George Russell's Mercedes as they head through towards the latter stages of this particular lap 22.
Now that everyone is pitted, Leclerc leads, Russell second, Verstappen third, Perez is fourth, Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo is fifth, Ocon is sixth, Sainz is seventh, right behind Ocon, then Norris is eighth, ninth is Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, and 10th from the back of the grid is Fernando Alonso, so that's good progress from him. Across the line they come again, Russell and Verstappen fighting over second place and dropping further and further back from Charles Leclerc. The DRS is open this time for Verstappen, and you just feel, knowing Verstappen as we do, there will come a point where he is going to lunge.
Max, I think you may have closed it last time around.
Because I'm pressing it 50 times before it opens.
Just try one button press after the curb.
So this is getting into the stages, and I don't mean to offend any grandparents listening, but trying to explain, like, on their laptop, like, you just only need to click it once. You only need to click it once, and they're getting frustrated, so they're just clicking it loads and loads of times, and then they're closing it by the click. So you press the button once, the DRS flap opens, you press it again, and you close it, and Verstappen's just whacking it left, right and centre, and he's opening it and closing it, and the rear wing looks like it's talking. Into the pits comes Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, for his second stop, and he's gone onto a set of medium tyres, so he was down in 15th place, I think, and now he's going to lose a couple more places after he had contact on the opening lap with Kevin Magnussen, got a puncture and was sent all the way to the back of the field. He's going to emerge now just in front of Kevin Magnussen, and he's back in 19th position, and the team still feel that he can finish in 8th place, or at least they did after the contact happened. Lap 24 of 66 here on 5 Live. This is the Spanish Grand Prix, and Verstappen is very close this time to the back of Russell. This is his best opportunity so far of getting ahead of Russell and up into second place. How hard does Russell defend? He covers the inside. Verstappen sends it to the inside, late on the brakes. Russell tries to hang it all the way around the outside and pulls it off. Beautiful stuff from Russell. They're still side by side coming into turn 3. Verstappen is going to have more grip. Russell squeezes him out, runs him off the circuit a little bit, but still holds on to second position. They're still wheel to wheel as they come into turn 4, and George Russell in the Mercedes doing a superb defensive drive to keep that second place, but can he do it for the rest of the Grand Prix?
Great stuff from both drivers. This is exactly what we want as fans, going wheel to wheel through these tight and twisty parts of the circuit. High speed stuff there as well to turns 3 and 4, and still Max Verstappen is tucked up right underneath the rear wing of George Russell. Can he get past? He seems to have figured out his DRS troubles. Can he make it count? The next major opportunity is going to be back down the start, finish straight as they get into the next lap.
This is going to be very close again for Verstappen. I was a little bit surprised that Russell sort of covered the inside, but still left Verstappen enough room, and it was very impressive that Russell was able to go around the outside. Jenny?
And this is why Russell found himself in that Mercedes seat. He is such a great racer, and it's fabulous to see him and Verstappen going wheel to wheel.
Verstappen's coming at him again, out of turn 15. He's a tiny bit closer than he was last time, and he was able to make the move. Will we see the same thing unfold? The DRS doesn't open for Verstappen, so it opens and then slams shut. So he's not going to be close enough to make a move this time. And that's going to...
He opened it again, actually. He's figured out that if it does open and close, if he can see it in his rearview mirror, he can maybe have another go at opening it, because actually, come the end of that straight, it was back open again. So, intermittent issues, which must be so frustrating and something he really shouldn't be having to think about, and this really tight battle between him and the Merc.
Tremendous fight between the two of them. We're just having another look, and I was amazed that Verstappen, well, he found that inside, but Russell held it all the way around the outside at turn 1, which I did not think he was going to be able to do. I thought that, and it was also fair racing from Verstappen, which is not something that we saw a lot of last year, so full credit to both of them.
Yeah, full respect shown by both drivers, and that provided great entertainment for us.
Yeah, Verstappen nearly got the...
Not sure he left your car's width.
Oh, come on. Another radio message from the Red Bull engineer saying, I'm not sure he left you enough room there. Oh.
Standard play, that one. It's more, as I say, it's more about just putting the word out there, just to make sure the stewards and the FIA are aware. But I don't think there was too much in that.
Worth bearing in mind, they're limited to the amount of times they can actually contact race control now, so they're using the TV commentary to basically get their viewpoints across. So I find that fascinating.
Verstappen a little bit further back this time. and he won't be able to make the move coming down into the first corner. He was 0.8 of a second away. Now, the problem here is for Russell. It's all very nice, him having this fight with Verstappen. We're all enjoying it very much. But there will come a point, won't there, where these drivers will have to stop again, and whichever way it goes, here's Perez's radio.
Get me Max out of the way so I overtake quickly.
Yeah, copy, Checo.
Well, that's interesting. So I was going to say that with tyre strategy and still another pit stop to make, it's going to be tough for Mercedes to hold on to the second place. What is also now going to be interesting is that Perez has caught the back of these two because they're fighting. Now, Perez presumably, I guess we might not even know, but presumably has a functioning DRS button. So he's saying, move Max out of the way so I can get ahead quickly. That's quite an interesting call for Red Bull.
Yeah, who has that conversation to Max Verstappen? You've got Sergio coming up behind, get out of his way. How's he going to respond to that one? But Sergio Perez putting in some fast laps over recent times. He's just backs up a little bit, but here's him talking.
Waited 2 seconds for now. We're in a different race from them.
Why don't you let me by? I have very fresh tires. I can get by quickly.
Yeah, Perez saying, why won't you let me by? I've got fresh tyres, I can get past quickly. Well, it's because Max is number one, my friend. I think that's pretty much the reason behind it. They would rather Perez finish fourth and Verstappen third than Perez finish second and Verstappen fourth. Here comes Verstappen again, down towards turn one, closing in here. Russell covers the inside and holds the place again. He's doing very well to only defend when he needs to defend, George Russell. He's never going unnecessarily defensive and then compromising himself for the rest of the lap.
No, it's a very mature drive so far from the youngster. But I've got to say, I wonder how much this is really hurting Max Verstappen. We're seeing him sliding quite a lot. He's pushing as hard as he dare with that car, and that's got to be hurting the tyres. There's no danger, I don't think, of a one-stop on the Verstappen side of that Red Bull camp this afternoon, because he is taking so much life. And I'm sure the same is true of George Russell in the Mercedes, but taking so much life out of this tyre in this particular stint. Oh, and it's a Ferrari going slowly.
Charles Leclerc, the race leader, is going slowly. Charles Leclerc is slowing down.
No!
In a season...
No, what happened? Lost power.
In a season where Red Bull have had all the mechanical problems, suddenly Ferrari are breaking down, and Charles Leclerc, the championship leader that looked like he had this race in the bag, is going to be grinding to a halt, and George Russell in the Mercedes is going to be leading this Grand Prix. Leclerc comes around the final corner, pulls into the pit lane, his race is run, and George Russell now leads for Mercedes. He's looking for his first win in Formula One. He's just got to hold off the two Red Bulls for another 35 laps and he'll be able to do it. But this is Verstappen, the closest he's been. Russell covers the inside, Verstappen to the outside into turn one, and Russell still holds the place, which is now the lead of the Spanish Grand Prix. George Russell in first, Verstappen in second, Perez in third, Charles Leclerc is out, so Valtteri Bottas is up into fourth position. This is quite the race.
Unbelievable stuff. What a disaster for Ferrari and Charles Leclerc. It was all looking so good, and in a moment it's all just disappeared for the poor Monegasque driver who's had such a stonkingly good weekend. But now this really comes alive, because Max Verstappen has extra impetus to get past that very, very wide Mercedes. I wonder if this might trigger a different strategy for Verstappen. I wonder if the undercut might be on here. He's spending so much time held up behind that Mercedes. I wonder whether the option of diving into the pits, putting another set of fresh medium tyres on, which he can do, of course, and then enabling him to push on that outlap and catapult his way past the Mercedes, as Lance Stroll gets tagged by, who was that?
Vettel. Stroll, sorry.
Stroll getting tagged by who?
Gasly.
Yeah, the two coming together, and Stroll taking a spin.
That was the sound of Charles Leclerc's Ferrari just shutting down. Stroll has come back into the pits after that. So if it finishes like this, then Leclerc would lead the championship by 1 point over Max Verstappen. Wow. But into the pits now comes Verstappen. So there we go. That's the decision made from the Red Bull man, and he's into the pits. Jenny Gow's down there.
Yes, he is. He comes into his pit box now, and the team, 23 men, lift him up. They do a pit stop. It's a safe and sound pit stop. It's out on a new set of the soft tyres in 2.5 seconds for the Red Bull team.
Now, that's an interesting move to go onto the soft tyres for Max Verstappen. I think they're confident that once they clear Russell, if they clear Russell, then they'll be able to win the Grand Prix fairly comfortably, because there won't be any pressure from anywhere else now, because Russell is in that position through sort of fortune, let's say, and we'll see how quickly it is before Mercedes come into the pits. Jenny?
Yeah, worth bearing in mind, Perez, they think, is on a one-stop. Perez could go out and win this race now quite easily because Russell has to come in and stop again.
Yeah, very true. So
it's a really interesting move, I think, that from Verstappen. The undercut was an obvious one. He was losing so much time being held up behind Russell, but I am surprised at the choice of tyre, because can he go to the end on a set of used soft tyres? There's still over half the race to go. I would suggest not. He could have probably got to the end if he'd put a set of mediums on, which he has. He has a set tucked away in the garage, fresh ones. So I'm quite surprised at that particular decision.
But I think they think getting ahead of Russell is the most important thing. Once they're ahead, if the tyres fall apart and he has to like hold on at the end ahead of Perez, so what? Who cares?
13 laps on a set of softs. Can he even get to the end on a set of softs with that long to go? I mean, it's a bold move, but well, brings this race alive, doesn't it?
Certainly does. Sergio Perez is fighting George Russell now. Russell still leads the Grand Prix. Perez is now in second position. He appears to have a working DRS. There is as Leclerc makes his way over to the pit wall, Jenny.
Yeah, he's just standing at the back. He went along, he shook hands with every single member of the team, then went to the pit wall, shook hands with every member of the team on the pit wall. He's just had a hug, and now he walks back in, getting a really rapturous round of applause from all the fans here. What utter heartbreak for Leclerc.
Now, if this were a classic George Russell season, a safety car would be deployed about now, and then he would gain a load of places, because he's had two very fortuitous safety cars in the season so far that have given him a big haul of points. But he is leading the Spanish Grand Prix. He is just ahead, though, of Sergio Perez, the Mexican, who, if Perez gets ahead of Russell, he's in a very, very strong position to potentially take the win. Russell, even though he's leading, that Mercedes is slower than the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, and even though Verstappen has made another stop, it's going to be a real tough job, whatever happens, for Russell to win this Grand Prix. So even though he's in first place, I would still describe him as very much not the favourite to win this race. Yeah. If he can, it would be remarkable. Here comes Sergio Perez through the final corner at turn 16. He's pretty close to the back of Russell, just 0.6 of a second behind him. So this is Perez's opportunity to try and get ahead of George Russell and into the lead of the Spanish Grand Prix. Russell covers the inside, Perez to the outside. Really late on the brakes from Sergio Perez, and he gets the job done. Brilliant move. He's got fresher tyres, and he was able to use it to take the lead of the Spanish Grand Prix. Perez hits the front, Russell down to second, Bottas is in third, Verstappen has just set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. He's in fourth position. Perez, we think, may not have to stop again. Russell, we're pretty sure will, but that was nice, bold stuff from Sergio Perez.
Yeah, very, very deep on the brakes. So he closed up behind him, down the start-finish straight, DRS open. George Russell moved deep into the inside, as he has been doing against Verstappen all the way through this race, but that didn't stop Sergio. Late on the brakes, deep into the corner. I wasn't sure if he was going to make it, but he absolutely did and made the move stick. Let's take a moment to appreciate Valtteri Bottas in third place right now, 13 seconds behind George Russell, but with a Max Verstappen on that fresh set of tyres after his pit stop, banging in fastest lap after fastest lap and closing the gap very quickly. But great position for Valtteri Bottas to be in, P3 right now.
Zhou Guanyu, the Chinese driver for Alfa Romeo, has just broken down, and he is out of the Grand Prix as well. Ferrari engine in the back of that. Bottas is under big pressure from Verstappen here, and he won't be able to hold off Verstappen very long. In fact, Verstappen's going to go all the way around the outside of turn 12. That's a flex. Verstappen, on his new soft tyres, just drives around Bottas at turn 12 and drops down into fourth position, Jenny.
Yes, incredible action out there on track at the moment. It looks like Ferrari getting ready for a Sainz pit stop. And I have to say congratulations to Perez as well. He had a new baby boy born in between Miami and this race called Emilio. So his mind has been somewhere else totally. He was delighted about the news, speaking to him about it on Thursday. And now he's leading the Grand Prix. What a week.
2 seconds ahead of George Russell. Into the pits now comes Carlos Sainz from 5th place. It's a new set of medium tyres for Carlos Sainz, who made a mistake, got a slow start, then made a mistake by himself at turn 4 that dropped him down the order, and he's trying to get back up into, I mean, potentially a 4th position. Well, Bottas seems a bit too far away, to be honest, from Esteban Ocon in 5th place. So I'll give you the order as it is at the moment. Perez leading, 2.2 seconds ahead of George Russell. 3rd now is Max Verstappen. He's 12 seconds back from Russell. So the undercut has already basically worked for Verstappen. He's going to be ahead of Russell when Russell makes his pit stop. And then it is Valtteri Bottas in 4th. Carlos Sainz has just pitted from 5th place, so it's Esteban Ocon in 5th position now. Then it's Norris, Tsunoda, Sainz, Alonso and Hamilton, the rest of the top 10. So Hamilton is now up into 10th position. We will be heading for all the team news from around the grounds ahead of the 4 o'clock kickoffs on the final day of the Premier League season here on 5 Live in about 10 minutes time. We'll have uninterrupted commentary of the Grand Prix on Sports Extra and the BBC Sport website, and Mark Priestley, the former McLaren mechanic, is alongside me.
I'm intrigued at Verstappen's strategy here. He's gone to the soft tyres, a used set of soft tyres, as we said, in his pit stop. He's now banging in the fastest lap after fastest lap, chasing down George Russell, 1 place ahead of him, currently in 2nd. When he gets there, how much of this tyre performance is he going to have left? Around about 3 or 4 laps, we expect Verstappen to catch up behind the rear wing of Russell, which of course was where he was for so many laps when they were on the same tyre. This softer tyre on Verstappen's car should give him more performance, but he's taken an awful lot out of it in the laps chasing down the Mercedes. Both drivers we would fully expect to have to make one more pit stop before the end of this race. I'm intrigued as how this is going to play out. I can't quite call it at this stage.
So I'm presuming that, well, Mercedes think Perez is 1 stop in. Surely he's going to be 2 stopping. If Russell and Verstappen are 3 stopping, surely Perez is going to be 2 stopping at least. He's done 15 laps on this medium tyre. I don't think that Mercedes guess was necessarily accurate. And maybe Red Bull were thinking that Mercedes would try and defend from that undercut. And so when they didn't, they're now a bit scuppered on these soft tyres because they'll just catch up to Russell and be in the same scenario again, and then they'll have to try and undercut him again. But maybe that's the plan, is use the soft tyres to catch up to the back of Russell, and then when you both have to do a pit stop at about the same time, then do the undercut.
I mean, possibly so, yeah, but why not do it the other way around? Why not put the medium tyre on when they went for the undercut earlier on? He still had enough performance, surely, to get past the Red Bull. He still had enough pace in that car, and if they'd managed that tyre, they could have run longer. I'm still slightly intrigued. It may well be that this is a masterstroke. It may well be that this works out nicely for them, but he's taking an awful lot of tyre performance out of these tyres right now in the chase to get back up to the position where he was just a few laps ago.
Into the pits comes Lando Norris in the McLaren from 6th place, and he is going to be making his 2nd pit stop of the day. Off come the medium tyres, and on goes soft tyres. So again, that'll be a tough one for Norris to get to the end on the soft, so that suggests they will be stopping again. Fernando Alonso, meanwhile, is right on the back of Yuki Tsunoda. Tsunoda has just made a pit stop, come out in 10th place. He's made 2 stops, as has Alonso. Alonso's come from the back of the grid and is now trying to get up into 10th position. Tsunoda can't stop Alonso, who goes to the inside and gets past into the first corner. Lap 34 of 66, Alonso now up into 10th place. The full order of the top 10, there's a few strategies still to play out, well, a lot of strategies still to play out, but broadly speaking, Perez leads, Russell 2nd, Verstappen 3rd, Bottas is 4th, Ocon is 5th, Sainz, Hamilton, Vettel, Norris and Alonso are the top 10, Tsunoda, Schumacher, Ricciardo, Gasly and Stroll the top 15, Latifi, Albon and Magnussen, the 18 drivers still running, Zhou and championship leader Charles Leclerc out of the Grand Prix.
I said earlier, didn't I, about the reason George Russell finds himself in that Mercedes is the fact that he can go out there and fight. He's so strong in that car, and it's a thing of beauty to watch him. Well, I'll tell you what, Perez, one of the reasons they took him on at Red Bull is because he's an absolute magician when it comes to making these tyres last. So I just wonder if he can work some magic with them and actually do this as a one-stop. It would be extraordinary, but I tell you what, there are some extraordinary drives going on out there. None less than Lando Norris going into this race feeling very poorly. He's just come in, as you said, for a pit stop, and he still continues in this beating sun, this aggressive heat to go around the circuit in Catalonia.
Lap 35 of 66, that's Jenny Gow in the pit lane alongside Mark Priestley and me, Jack Nicholls. And we have got, well, we're just over half race distance in what has been quite the Grand Prix so far.
It's good, Max. You're going to be putting pressure on Russell in a couple of laps' time.
So Verstappen being told you'll be putting pressure on George Russell in a couple of laps' time. Verstappen shouldn't have been putting pressure on Russell because he was running second behind Charles Leclerc. He made a mistake, ended up in the gravel, then dropped back. Leclerc has subsequently broken down, and mistakes and breakdown. It feels like this is the late 80s again. This is a really interesting Grand Prix, this. Perez leading 5.3 seconds ahead. We're 5 minutes or so away from heading back to Mark Chapman and all the team news ahead of the Premier League title deciding day, and also the relegation deciding day, and also the Champions League spot deciding day. So plenty to go on there this afternoon, and you'll hear it all here. In fact, it's the only place you can hear commentary of the Man City game and the Liverpool game. Man City are on 5 Live. City are here following us on... Liverpool are here following us on Sports Extra. Jenny Gow.
Yeah, just ruminating about Sergio Perez and what Red Bull will do as one of the Alpines comes in. It's Esteban Ocon just in front of me to do their pit stop, so it's going to sound a bit noisy. They've put on a set of the soft tyres. It's a slow rear right pit stop for the Alpine team, but out Esteban Ocon goes. What do they do? What do they do? Perez is leading this race. Leclerc is out of it. That's the championship battle, really. 19 points the difference between Verstappen and Leclerc coming into this race. Do they make Perez give up what could be a potential win for Verstappen if they are 1-2 towards the end of this race?
Yes.
I think
yes.
So. I think what they'll do, it'll be under the guise of a tyre stop, but I'm not saying they're going to orchestrate this solely to get Verstappen into the lead. But Perez, we've talked about it already, done a huge amount of laps on this tyre. As the race begins to draw towards a close, he's going to be coming under some real strain with those tyres, and it would make perfect sense if Verstappen, in fact Verstappen just got by George Russell as Russell pulls into the pit. So Verstappen now behind Perez. What other reason would Red Bull have not to bring Perez into the pits late on in this race? That frees up the race lead for Max Verstappen.
So into the pits now comes George Russell, as you say, from second place. Perez leading, Verstappen second, Russell in third now on a set of medium tyres. Now they will take him to the end of this Grand Prix. Verstappen, though, will need to pit again. We're fairly sure on those soft tyres. So if Verstappen needs to pit again, he needs to build up a 22, 24, 25 to be safe second advantage over George Russell in the next 10 or 15 laps on a set of soft tyres. This is going to be really interesting for Red Bull to try and pull this off. Here's Verstappen's radio.
So our strategy here is to have the tyre advantage we need in that final stint, Max.
So the plan is we'll come out behind George Russell in a bit when we pit, but we'll have fresher tyres, and then we'll overtake him and finish second.
It's just what I was going to say. They're going to come out later in this race with a much fresher set of the same type of tyres, so they're going to come out onto the medium tyre, I'm sure, towards the very end of the race, but they'll have far fewer laps on it than Russell's tyre will have by that point, and therefore more performance available to them. Of course, what they have got to do at that stage is get past again, and that was something they really struggled to do.
Now Perez does pit. Sergio Perez in the Red Bull pits onto a set of medium tyres. So as we suspected, he needed one more stop, and he has decided to do it now. So that means Verstappen leads the Grand Prix. Perez will come out in second place ahead of George Russell, and that's going to be the order then, with Verstappen needing to make one more pit stop. So Perez at the moment has the net lead of the Grand Prix as they come around turns 1 and 2. And Perez is he's already 17.5 seconds back from Verstappen, and then it's 3 seconds back to Russell. We'll keep an eye on those gaps.
It's a straight fight, isn't it, now, between Perez and Russell. They're on the same tyre strategy with the rest of the race still to play out. It's Verstappen is the only anomaly here. Verstappen still to stop, but can he run much later on? As you said earlier, come out on the fresh tyres and really make use of that tyre advantage towards the end? I think he probably can.
Lap 38 of 66 in the Spanish Grand Prix. Max Verstappen is leading at the moment, but he's got one more pit stop to make. Sergio Perez is in second place, George Russell is in third, Charles Leclerc, the championship leader, breaking down earlier on in this Grand Prix, so he won't score any points from this race. Verstappen, if he finishes second, will be just 1 point behind. If he wins the Grand Prix, he'll take the lead of the championship. And it's going to be really, really interesting. We've got continuous commentary on Sports Extra, but right now, ahead of the 4 o'clock kickoffs, let's go back on 5 Live to Mark Chapman. But you people have made the right choice because you're on Sports Extra or the BBC Sport website. We're very appreciative of that, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back on 5 Live in a little bit, but we will be continuing to bring you uninterrupted coverage of a very, very interesting Spanish Grand Prix. Jenny Gow is in the pit lane.
I am, and Charles Leclerc has withdrawn from this race. He had to retire. Ferrari say it was due to an as yet unidentified power unit issue. Hard times for Leclerc.
Yeah, really hard times. Absolutely heartbreaking. It's happened to him before, hasn't it? Where he's been in such a dominant position, done such a good job, and then only for the car to let him down. But it has brought this race alive and handed advantage over to Red Bull with 2 cars at the front of this field. Verstappen leading from Perez in second place. The difference between the two being we think Verstappen has to stop again, whereas Perez and George Russell behind him do not.
Lando Norris gets ahead of Sebastian Vettel and up into 8th place. Verstappen leading. He's 17. He's 21 seconds at the moment ahead of George Russell. He was 1/10 of a second faster than Russell on that last lap. Now, he doesn't need to push particularly hard. He just needs to extend this stint as far as he can, basically, because he doesn't need to ruin these tyres and pit earlier. The plan is all about having much fresher tyres than Russell at the end, because if his laps are like 3 or 4 laps, if his tyres are 3 or 4 laps newer, it's not going to be a huge difference. He needs
That's
a good
right.
10-lap difference or something.
Particularly given that we know that Max Verstappen has a DRS issue. His DRS flap only opening intermittently in the previous battle that he had with George Russell, tucked underneath the rear wing of the Mercedes, but could not get the DRS flap to work, or certainly not on all occasions. So if that problem reoccurs, it makes that overtaking move even harder. So absolutely, the tyre offset, the tyre performance offset, could well be the thing that gives him the opportunity to get by.
Jenny.
Verstappen's had one piece of luck, hasn't he, in Leclerc withdrawing from this race. He could really do with a virtual safety car or a safety car right now. A 60% probability of that happening around this track here in Barcelona.
I just wonder whether Verstappen can. It's a 22-second pit stop. The gap is now 21.5 from Verstappen to Russell. So maybe he can in this clear air, and he just went 0.3 of a second quicker than Russell on the last lap. Maybe he can go quickly enough to come out ahead of Russell anyway, and to then attack his teammate Perez.
He's certainly putting in the laps that might get him close to that, but it is a gamble for the very reason you just talked about. If he does force himself into that pit stop early because he's run out of these soft tyres he's on right now, the offset between him and Russell and Perez won't be very much. So he's got to make it stick. He's got to get that complete pit stop window, or the strategy potentially becomes a lot more difficult.
Russell, a very slow lap, a second that he lost to Verstappen on that last tour, so the gap becomes 22.5 seconds now. So Verstappen is almost in that window of being able to pit and come out ahead of Russell. Kevin Magnussen is on the attack, trying to get ahead of Alex Albon in the Williams. They're fighting over 17th and 18th places, and that's straightforward for Magnussen. Hamilton, I think, is in a strong position now in 6th place, because I think he'll need to stop again, but pretty sure everyone behind him is on the soft tyres. Your Ocon, Norris, Vettel, Alonso, Tsunoda, they're all on the soft tyres at this point in the race. So they all probably need to stop again as well. So even if Hamilton pits again, everyone behind him will have to pit again. So I think 6th place might be his legitimate position here.
I think that's a very good point. And think back to the early stage of this race, lap 3 or 4, Lewis Hamilton on his radio asking if he should retire the car after that early incident on lap 1 that dropped him right to the back of the field, and the team coming on the radio and saying, no, look, we think P8 and points could well be an option here. Now look at him up in P6 with a reasonable shot at a decent haul of points in this race. I mean, that absolutely could be crucial as this championship unfolds.
Lap 42 of 66. Verstappen's lead as he comes across the line. He does a 27.4, which is a little slower than he went previously. We'll see what lap time Russell does as they come through on this particular occasion. He's just coming out of the final corner now. Out and cuts the timing beam, and it's another 27.3, so he takes a 10th back from Verstappen, because that's got to be Mercedes' hope and Russell's hope that they can stay in front of Verstappen. And okay, it would then be tough to keep Verstappen behind, but maybe doable because of Verstappen's DRS issues.
I think probably their only hope, in all honesty, given the situation. So the team will be on to George Russell. They'll know exactly what's going on. They'll know exactly what Verstappen and Red Bull are thinking in trying to build that gap, and just giving George a hurry up and telling him, look, we need a few push laps here. We need to protect that pit stop gap, that pit stop window that Max Verstappen is trying trying to open out, because if he manages to break that window, if he manages to get into the pits and back out in front, I think effectively any hope of a decent position further than P3 for George Russell goes out the window.
Verstappen leading, Perez second, Russell third. Valtteri Bottas in fourth now is going to come under quite a bit of pressure from Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. Sainz, who got a slow start and then made a mistake all by himself in the early part of this Grand Prix, fell back down the order. He's done well to recover up into fifth, but can he get back ahead of Bottas? They've both made 2 stops, so I think they're on pretty similar strategies here, and we'll see what Sainz can do. Scruffy day this for Sainz, you have to say, especially when you think back to the mistake on the opening lap in Australia. I think there was another mistake recently, wasn't there? Did he do something in... What happened in... crashed in qualifying in Imola?
It's a disastrous weekend for Ferrari, given how well it went for the first part of the weekend. They had the opportunity at their feet, and they've managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory somehow here.
With Leclerc out of the race as well, Jenny.
Yeah, and he said that he doesn't know what the issue is yet with the power unit. He does say it hurts, but there are some positives. A typical Charles Leclerc comment to find something positive. Said, we have shown that we were quick. Don't worry, it's Monaco next week. Always goes well for him there.
Yeah, last year he took pole position and then crashed in qualifying and then couldn't start the race because of a problem that was only discovered after they rebuilt the car. Into the pits comes Sebastian Vettel, so he's the first of those midfield runners on the soft tyres to drop down the order a little bit.
Got to say, from a Charles Leclerc perspective, that positive that he's taking there is a valid one. They go into Monaco next week, which has all the attributes of a circuit that should suit the extra downforce that Ferrari has. So whilst they had opportunity here and they've blown it, next week again comes another opportunity where it really might fall into their hands.
Max Verstappen's soft tyres are shredded. They're absolutely shredded, especially the front left, which takes a lot of the pain around here, and the rear left as well. But he's still going out there. His gap is still 22.3 seconds, so it's still in the window, but not absolutely in the window to pit now and come out ahead of Russell. But he is building a bigger and bigger offset in terms of having much fresher tyres.
Yeah, and imagine the pressure on the guys in the pits if it's that tight. If he was to come into the pits now, he would be emerging from the pit lane after an almost perfect pit stop, wheel to wheel with George Russell. They want to just take away that risk element. They want to mitigate against that situation happening. So just building an extra few tenths, half a second, could literally make all the difference and take a tiny little bit of pressure off the guys in that pit stop.
7 laps Russell has been on these tyres, so I don't know what exactly offset they're aiming for at Red Bull, but even
that's enough on a medium tyre. I think the medium has a lot more longevity than a 7-lap offset will give too much difference with.
Yeah, so he needs to keep going for a little bit longer if possible. Max Verstappen, he comes around the chicane at 14 and 15 and comes into the pits this time. So this is it. It'll be a 7 or 8 lap offset between the two drivers. Is he going to come out in front? That's going to be the question. It's going to be really tight between Verstappen and Russell. Into the pits comes the Red Bull man. Off go the soft tyres, on go a set of the medium tyres. It's a pretty swift pit stop, you have to say, 2.4 seconds, and Verstappen is now making his way to the end of the pit lane. Sergio Perez is back into the lead of the Grand Prix, but here comes George Russell out over the line. Verstappen now gets up to speed. Russell has got a much bigger closing speed, but Verstappen's going to do it here and come out ahead. Max Verstappen emerges in second place ahead of George Russell, and it is a Red Bull 1-2. Perez in the lead, Verstappen second, Russell is down to third, and then it's going to be Bottas in fourth, Sainz in fifth, Hamilton, Ocon, Norris, Alonso, Yuki Tsunoda the top 10, but that has pretty much booked the 1-2 for Red Bull, I think, with Perez 6 seconds ahead of Verstappen. Verstappen will now try and close in on Perez. Is Perez going to be allowed to win this Grand Prix? I'd be hugely surprised, but we'll wait and see.
We will wait and see, but great work, as we've come to expect from the boys and girls in that Red Bull pit stop, delivering a stop of 2.4 seconds under that pressure that we talked about. Now it's down to the drivers. There's nothing more the team can do, certainly in terms of pit stops. We expect everybody now at the front to run to the end of this race, and it is Sergio Perez with a 12-second gap over Max Verstappen. and I suspect that gap will close very quickly. The fresher tyres on the second Red Bull will give them more performance. And as you say, as Jack said earlier, the big question is, how will Red Bull play this? What strategy will they play here? Will they allow their drivers, or even enforce their drivers, to switch position?
Through goes Sebastian Vettel ahead of Pierre Gasly. So Vettel has just pitted and now come out in front of Pierre Gasly. So he's up into 13th place, Sebastian Vettel, one of the first of those midfield runners from Ocon, Norris, Alonso and Tsunoda to make a pit stop. So working to try and undercut those and gain a few places. And then behind the top 10, it's Schumacher, who's in 11th place after he dropped back quite quickly in the early stages of the Grand Prix. Ricciardo is 12th. Into the pits now comes Carlos Sainz. So the Ferrari driver from 5th position comes into the pit lane. He was 5.2 seconds back from Valtteri Bottas. He dropped back quite far, which looked a bit slow, only caught the end of Sainz's pit stop. It was 2.9 seconds for Carlos Sainz. He's going out on the soft tyres. The gap was 1.4 to Valtteri Bottas, so can he undercut Valtteri Bottas and get into 4th place? That's going to be the aim.
Could also be the only man that potentially could take away the fastest lap from Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen currently holding that fastest lap that he set on that last set of soft tyres. The only other driver in amongst the top few cars is now Carlos Sainz on the soft tyre, with a potential, with a car underneath him potentially capable of taking away that fastest lap and the potential point that comes with it.
Yeah, that's very true. And at the moment, Verstappen, if he finished here in 2nd place, that he would be 1 point behind Leclerc at the top of the championship.
How many times I've been wide, I didn't notice.
So we've had 3 warnings already.
3 warnings already is...
track limit warnings, isn't it? You've got black and white flags for running wide and getting track limits. And if he gets another one of those warnings, there will be a penalty attached to it. So he's got to be very, very careful and put a little bit of extra concentration on exactly where he places his car around the circuit, which takes a tiny bit of concentration away from just going as fast as he possibly can. But Hamilton currently sitting in 6th place. He won't want anything to interfere with those points that he's wrestled back from a very disappointing start in this race.
So, just to finish that point, Verstappen, they would be level on points if it finished like this, because Verstappen has the fastest lap currently, but as we were saying, Sainz could take that fastest lap away, and if he did, then it would be 1 point advantage.
Okay, you want a different strategy to Max? If he's quicker, we let him through.
That's very unfair, but okay.
Look, Perez knows the game, doesn't he? You're not on a different strategy at all. Like, I mean, well, I guess he is on a different strategy in terms of the tyres are fresher or whatever. So,
but it's a free-for-all now to the end of the race.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. If we're in the middle stint, yeah, fine, that makes sense. But usually, from the last pit stop onwards, you don't tend to get sort of team orders, as it were. Sergio Perez is leading the Grand Prix here. Max Verstappen is in 2nd position and closing in on his teammate. He made a pit stop, came out on soft tyres and managed to get ahead of George Russell and up into 2nd place. So Perez leads, Verstappen is 2nd, George Russell is 3rd. Verstappen's in this position because he spun all by himself in the early stages of the Grand Prix, had to fight his way back through the order, is now back up into 2nd place. Charles Leclerc was leading the Grand Prix from pole position for Ferrari, but he broke down and ended up out of this Grand Prix. So if it finishes like this, Verstappen would be level with Leclerc on points at the top of the championship, but chances are Verstappen is going to get ahead of his Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez, and that would give him the lead in the drivers' standings, which would be quite something after how far back he was after the Australian Grand Prix, and it would be the first time this season that he would have been in the lead of the championship. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, and we're going to get a bit of teamwork here, I think, between Sergio Perez leading in the Red Bull and Max Verstappen in 2nd place.
You could call it teamwork, couldn't you? I mean, that message to Sergio Perez that we heard a few moments ago said, look, if Max Verstappen is faster than you, don't get in his way. Now it's over to you, Sergio. Is he going to be faster? Max on slightly younger tyres, of course, so he has the potential. We know how good Max is, and he's now right up underneath the rear wing, or in fact, even in DRS zone now as they come down onto the start-finish straight. Is Max Verstappen's DRS flap going to open? He's had problems all race long with that particular button on the steering wheel. It closes up, no DRS for Max Verstappen on this occasion, but can he get by, or will Sergio just let him through?
Well, when Perez was told, don't hold Max up, he came on the radio, he said, It's unfair, but I understand. He knows what side his bread is buttered here, Sergio Perez. It's not. Red Bull is a very much a... And there goes the move. Verstappen to the inside into turn 4. Sergio Perez lets him past, and Max Verstappen now leads the Spanish Grand Prix, and that would put him in the lead of the championship, with Perez retiring, with Charles Leclerc retiring, going to the Monaco Grand Prix next weekend. Lewis Hamilton is back in the pits. He was up into 5th place. I think he's going to emerge still in 6th position, and after he had contact on the opening lap with Kevin Magnussen and dropped to the back of the order, this could be some solid points for Hamilton at least. Not exactly what he's after, but he emerges in 7th now, actually, behind Esteban Ocon. But like I was saying, Perez knows Red Bull is Verstappen's team. You're not going to fight.
Thank you, mate.
And thank you, says Verstappen on the radio.
Yeah, I think it's the obvious thing. We saw it coming. I'm sure that Sergio saw it coming as well. And look, this championship, I think we can all determine that this championship is, at this early stage of the season, most likely going to fall between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. That's certainly the way that it's looking. And if that is the case come the end of the season, the points that are scored now are no less valuable than the points scored in the final race. So anything that they can shove Max Verstappen's way will surely help. And I think, coming from a team perspective, as I've done for many, many years, I can sort of understand why they've done it. I think it's probably the right decision, heartbreaking though it will be for somebody like Sergio.
A lot of teams, though, wait a lot longer into the season, don't they? There was a big furore in 2002 when at Ferrari, Rubens Barrichello was told to let Michael Schumacher through at the last corner in the Austrian Grand Prix in 2002, which was only must have been around 7 or 8 of the season, and everyone was quite furious and the crowd were booing and all of that. Is it a bit more acceptable now to be doing it this early in the season, around 6 of 22?
I don't think fans would think it is. No, I think from a fan perspective, you're probably looking on thinking that is unfair, as Sergio quite rightly called it. But from a team perspective, you've got to look at this differently. It's a business. There's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of prizes at stake. And as I said, the points that are scored in round 6 are no different. They're no less valuable than the points scored in the very last race of the season. So pick them up wherever you can.
Down in the pit lane is Jenny Gao.
Yeah, it's a big difference, isn't it, as well, from first to second. 25 points for a win, only 18 for second, so a 7-point swing is a big swing when it comes to points and towards the end of the season, but it is heartbreaking for Perez. However, I think if this was any other team but Red Bull, they wouldn't have switched.
Well, that was that was sort of where I was going, because we had it a lot with Bottas and Hamilton, didn't we, Jenny, where they wouldn't do that, and then they did once, but right towards the end of the season in Russia a few years ago.
They always had parity between their drivers when it came to strategy, when it came to tactics of a race weekend. They went into it fair and square on equals and could fight for the win. But as you say, Red Bull have a very different mentality. They maybe have always had a very clear number 1 driver. If you think back to Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber in those days, and the comments on the radios, they just do things differently. And it's round 6. I feel it's disappointing that they've made that switch so early in the season. But with 7 points, you can understand. If it came down to, let's say, another Abu Dhabi last year, and they were level on points going into the last race, they'd feel foolish if they hadn't have made that call.
Lewis Hamilton has just got ahead of Esteban Ocon, overtaking the Alpine driver, and gets up into 6th position. Ocon 7th, Norris 8th, Alonso 9th, and Tsunoda 10th. And it is Verstappen leading, Perez 2nd, Russell 3rd. And here's Russell. Russell's going to come into the pits on this lap, so he's doing another stoppage, George Russell. I presume Bottas in 4th will have to stop again, but Russell will be coming into the pits. Yeah, I don't know if people's sort of sentiments on sport have changed since 20 years ago and that 2002 incident that I was referring to. I don't know, but to me it seems like an absolute no-brainer if you want Verstappen to win the championship.
I think that's it. It's such big business nowadays, but I do think from a fan perspective they'll see it very differently. From a sporting perspective it doesn't seem fair, but if you're sitting in the garages or on the pit wall of one of those teams with so much at stake, to me it seems like the obvious call.
That 52 of 66, Russell has just been into the pits, Jenny.
Yes, he has. It was a relatively slow stop, a 3.4 second stop, so it's about 1 second slower than the optimum. He has put on a soft set of tyres, so I just wonder if he's going to try and steal that fastest lap away from, I think you said it was Max Verstappen who currently had it?
Well,
no, it's changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, Hamilton has it now because Hamilton has just taken it away from Verstappen. So there's 1 point available for the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. Verstappen has it at the moment. Hamilton has it, taken it from Verstappen, and now we'll see if Russell takes it from Hamilton. But that's probably also a Russell is now 3.8 seconds back from Bottas, so we'll see whether Bottas needs to pit again.
It's cool, isn't it? Dropping out of P3 with just less than 15 laps to go, dropping out of a podium position in the hope that those soft tyres will enable George Russell to get himself back past Valtteri Bottas. May well be that that's the case. They are a much faster tyre around this circuit and should quite easily do those 15 laps. But Valtteri Bottas will be thinking, well, can I just make my car wide enough just to hang on and get that unlikely podium?
Yeah, Russell, the driver who took Bottas' seat at Mercedes, and Bottas is there in third position, and Russell is closing in pretty quickly, 1.7 seconds back. It was always going to be tough for Russell to win this Grand Prix, which is where he was earlier on today, but ultimately that Mercedes not quite having the pace. I think there's a few other elements that people are chucking in. Kaylee has pointed out on hashtag BBCF1 that there was Valtteri James at Silverstone last year, so that was a little bit earlier on in the season, admittedly. And Daniel Eckersley saying that the issue in 2002 was also that Ferrari was so dominant. They weren't actually in a championship fight in 2002, and Russell has got ahead of Bottas. Has Bottas come into the pits, or has he just done it straight away there? That's really
very,
swift.
Very quickly, hasn't he?
Yeah, so sure Russell has got ahead of Bottas and is up into third place. How did he do it? Coming down into turn one, he's a long way back here, George Russell, but he absolutely throws it in and gets ahead of Valtteri Bottas. Was nowhere near an appropriate distance back to make that overtake.
But Valtteri left the door wide open, no defence really. I don't think he expected it coming, it was so far back.
Absolutely. So Russell up into the third spot. That's that one done. Into the pits now comes Sergio Perez. So he is on a different strategy to Max Verstappen, I suppose, technically speaking now. So, and with that Russell pit stop, they can now pit Perez, and it looks a little bit less team ordery, I suppose. But whatever happens, Perez was never going to be able to win the Grand Prix once Verstappen had got up into second place, and Perez is going to emerge, I think, ahead comfortably of George Russell. Yes, indeed. So
on the soft tyres as well. So again, an opportunity to wrestle back that fastest lap point back into the hands of Red Bull.
Okay, this will be your shot at fastest lap.
And that is Perez being told this is your chance to get fastest lap. Because presumably, okay, so are they going to do that with Verstappen as well? So they're going to pit Perez to go for fastest lap, and now they've got a gap to pit Verstappen as well to go for fastest lap, potentially, right at the end of the Grand Prix.
Verstappen doesn't have any new softs available to him, so he's got another set of used, but they are pretty well used now, because the already used softs, the best set of those softs, is already used in this Grand Prix, so it may well be they don't take the risk with Verstappen. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. He's sitting in P1 right now. It's always a slight risky move to pull your driver out of the lead of the race, just in the hope to get that one extra point.
Slow pit stop for Fernando Alonso. The front right was very slow coming off, and as a result he has a bit of a slow pit stop. He had come into the pits from 9th position. It took 6 seconds, that pit stop, 4 seconds longer than normal, well, 3.5 seconds longer than normal, and as a result I think he's lost out to Mick Schumacher there. Schumacher has got up into 9th place, so the top 10, Verstappen, Perez, Russell, Bottas, Sainz the top 5, then Hamilton, Ocon, Norris, Schumacher and Alonso are the top 10 at the moment. We've got 12 laps to go in the Spanish Grand Prix here on 5 Live. Then we'll be straight back to Mark Chapman and the evenings or afternoons Premier League games on the final day of the season. On 5 Live we'll have the Man City game. On Sports Extra will be the Liverpool match.
So I think it looks like a decent afternoon for Mercedes-Benz, given the troubles that they started this race with, certainly in the hands of Lewis Hamilton. All the way to the back he fell after contact on the opening lap, and now up into 6th place with all the pit stops now shaken out, certainly at the front. That's Hamilton scoring valuable points. That's damage limitation in a great way, with his teammate Russell currently sitting in a podium spot. I'd say that goes down as a decent afternoon, all things considered.
Very much so. When I spoke to the guys yesterday after qualifying, they both said this car is set up more for the race than it is for qualifying. So they were pretty pleased with qualifying, even if Lewis Hamilton did complain about his confidence with the car and how it felt. But they always knew that there was an opportunity in this race, if strange things happen, which they have today, that they could maximise that. So, yeah, I think it's a really positive step forward for Mercedes. They've brought upgrades this weekend to the car to try and stop the car bouncing or porpoising, as they call it, so much. That seems to be effective. So it's a kind of double win for Mercedes, even though they're not winning this race.
Yeah, it's not too bad in the grand scheme of things, is it? Hamilton is back up now to where he started, and he sets the fastest lap of the race, but Sergio Perez now sets the fastest lap of the race, a 1 minute 24.108. So Perez has fastest lap at the moment. Carlos Sainz is closing in rapidly on Valtteri Bottas in 4th position. Sainz pitted recently for a new set of soft tyres. Bottas has been on these medium tyres for 20 laps. Not sure if he can get to the end of the Grand Prix, and Hamilton is coming into the fight too, so this will be interesting. And in fact, Hamilton has been going a second quicker than Carlos Sainz over these last few laps, so he might be in the fight for 5th with the Ferrari before too long, although I wouldn't have thought that Hamilton has the pace really to get past Carlos Sainz, considering the nature of the Mercedes and the Ferrari. But we'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of confidence now in the Mercedes team, and whilst this result may not reflect...
fourth here. He might be able to get fourth, Hamilton, if he can get Sainz and Bottas.
Exactly, yeah. And how good would that be? Russell 3rd, Lewis Hamilton 4th. I think the biggest thing coming out of this weekend for the Mercedes team is not necessarily the result, and the result is looking great as it stands right now, but more about the confidence they've got with their car and the platform they've now developed that they can build from. They haven't been able to develop the car looking for performance. They've been constantly trying to firefight all the way through the early part of this season. Well, now they seem to understand their car better. It clearly has pace. It's got a certain level of reliability that means they can now build forward as the rest of the season goes on, and I think that's the biggest positive to be taken away from the Spanish Grand Prix weekend if you're a Mercedes fan.
Lap 57 of 66. Max Verstappen leading the Grand Prix in Barcelona. Perez is 2nd, Russell is 3rd. Now Carlos Sainz is less than a second back from Valtteri Bottas. Then it's 1.7 seconds from Sainz to Hamilton. So that is the fight that is now beginning to really take shape over that 4th position. Sainz really close to Bottas as they come into turn 1. He's on soft tyres. We saw George Russell make pretty light work of Valtteri Bottas into the first corner. Sainz would... 4th place would be fine for his home Grand Prix. I think 5th or 4th is a bit of a nothing when he should have been arguably sort of potentially winning this Grand Prix, to be honest. With Verstappen making the error and Leclerc retiring, Sainz could have won this Grand Prix had he not made his mistake. But, you know, ifs and buts all over the place.
And Hamilton now in DRS range of Carlos Sainz, whilst Sainz battles with Valtteri Bottas. Tucked up behind him is now Lewis Hamilton, closing right up, just 0.6 of a second, right up underneath the rear wing of Sainz. So this is now a 3-way battle, and it could literally go in either direction. This is going to be interesting.
Bottas 4th in the Alfa Romeo, Carlos Sainz 5th in the Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton 6th in the Mercedes, having been last at the end of the opening lap after contact with Kevin Magnussen. So they are all right together here as they swing through the right-hander of turn 12, and Sainz now knows he needs to get past Bottas as quickly as possible, or Hamilton will be right with him. They're coming now through the little chicane, the slow left-right at 14 and 15, and then out onto the start-finish straight. Bit of a twitch for Carlos Sainz as he got on the power. The back end tried to wriggle away from him. They all now will open the DRS behind Bottas coming down towards turn 1. Bottas covers the inside. Sainz goes to the outside and does make it through. Carlos Sainz then up into 4th position. Valtteri Bottas down to 5th. Hamilton will now want to get past Bottas as quickly as possible. Looks to the outside at turn 3 and goes right around the outside at turn 3. Hamilton up into 5th place, gets ahead of Valtteri Bottas, and will now chase down the Ferrari of Sainz for 4th position. He's been going about a second a lap quicker previously, and with 9 laps to go, Hamilton is in the fight for 4th, having been last at the end of the first lap.
Yeah, and Carlos Sainz needs to keep a big view of his rear view mirrors at this stage, because it's Hamilton that looks like he's got the racier car of the 3 of those. Valtteri Bottas now dropping away, but Carlos Sainz has pulled away at the lead of this group of 3, but Lewis Hamilton now starting to chase him down, and with a car that looks particularly feisty right now.
Okay, this stint length was a mistake.
That's Bottas saying, yeah, we shouldn't have gone this long on these tyres. This was not working out. It was a mistake because he's lost the position, but also It's worth a shot, wouldn't it?
Yeah, gamble that's often worth taking. Only 7 laps away from the finish. It nearly worked out, just not quite.
And he's got 30 seconds to Esteban Ocon in 7th position, so he can pit now, new set of tyres, and everybody can relax. We're half an hour away from the final day of the Premier League season. The title on the line. Man City at home to Aston Villa, Liverpool at home to Wolves. The Man City game will be here on 5 Live. The Liverpool game will be on Sports Extra, and we also have reporters at all of the grounds this afternoon, because there's also Tottenham versus Arsenal for the final Champions League spot, and of course will Leeds or Burnley join Watford and Norwich in relegation to the Championship. So all of that coverage coming up. Well, the matches start in half an hour, but well before then we'll be heading back to Mark Chapman to preview all of the games on the final day. For all the post Grand Prix reaction, you can download the Checker Flag podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or on BBC Sounds later on this afternoon. Here comes Hamilton now in the Mercedes, right up behind the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz as they come down towards the left-hander of turn 10. Hamilton closes in, isn't able to make the move here, but he's going to have a real chance coming into turn 1.
His car looks in much better shape than the red Ferrari just ahead of him as they come through the final part of the lap now. If he can get a good exit out of the final turn 16, looking much tighter through the corner, hitting the apexes, where the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz just is struggling to keep it tucked into the lines. Here he comes then, Verstappen through the chicane, just underneath the rear wing of that Ferrari, gets a decent exit and out onto the start-finish straight. DRS is going wide open. Is this the one, Jack?
Hamilton right behind Sainz then, the fight for 4th place. Sainz will cover the inside line. Hamilton is there right behind him to the outside, late on the brakes and sweeps through into 4th place. Lewis Hamilton gets ahead of the Ferrari into 4th position. Applause in the Mercedes garage because they are now running 3rd and 4th. Hamilton, contact with Magnussen at the first corner, or the first lap of the race, fell all the way to the back. Now he's got back up into 4th position. Won't be able to close in on George Russell, I don't think, but that was a nice move from Hamilton. Had to get it done on braking around the outside, had the extra speed from the slipstream of Sainz, but still needed to make the move, and he did, up into 4th place. And on lap 2, Jenny Gow, Hamilton said, shall I pit and let's save the engine?
Thank goodness he didn't, hey? Radio?
Good lad. So that's P4, mate. Head down.
Pete Bonington very happy with that, his race engineer.
And I think I asked a few races ago, can Mercedes even win a race this year? And so many of you guys listening said, nah, can't see it, can't see them winning at all, can't see either driver winning. Tell you what, they're putting themselves back in the frame, aren't they? Surely it can't be long until they can be in a place to challenge for a race win. Is there still a championship challenge there, though? That's the question now.
Well, we're getting very excited here. I think a race win in the second half of the season is possibly possible. You'd probably need a bit of fortune in the way that it has worked today with Leclerc retiring. I don't think a championship challenge is on, but maybe a race win second half of the season I can see coming.
We'll go to Monaco next. Anything can happen there.
Well, yeah, that's
literally anything can happen there. But
usually nothing happens there. That's the irony of Monaco.
Yeah. What a great day, though, for Red Bull. Great day for Red Bull, currently sitting 1st and 2nd with just a few laps to go. But what a great day for Mercedes as well. 3rd and 4th. I don't think any of us would have predicted that before this weekend began. And they have really maximised the upgrades they've brought to this car and the opportunities that they've created for themselves over this weekend. So they're 2 big winners, Red Bull and Mercedes. The massive loser, of course, Ferrari.
Yeah, in particular, Charles Leclerc, who is going to lose the lead of the championship. 5 laps to go in the Spanish Grand Prix, and Max Verstappen is leading it. He's 20 seconds clear of his teammate Sergio Perez. George Russell is 3rd for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton 4th in the other Mercedes. Carlos Sainz is 5th in the Ferrari. 6th is Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Esteban Ocon in the Alpine is 7th. Lando Norris is 8th in the McLaren. 9th is Fernando Alonso's Alpine, and 10th is Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri, and he's 12 seconds clear of Sebastian Vettel. So Tsunoda looking like he may well pick up a point. The thing with Hamilton and Sainz that I find quite interesting is that their tyres are pretty similar age-wise. Hamilton's tyres only 3 laps fresher, only 3 laps newer than Carlos Sainz, which isn't a huge amount, but he was able to close in at a second a lap.
Isn't that a sign of this Ferrari? It's one of the Ferrari weaknesses that we know about. In race conditions, they just cannot keep the tyres alive for long enough. It's one of the things that has hampered them all the way through this season so far. They've got a quicker car than Red Bull on so many occasions, but not a better race car, and perhaps that was another example of that.
Hamilton then running in 4th position, ahead now of Sainz. Russell in 3rd. Verstappen's on quite a run of form, isn't he? This will be 3 wins in a row. It'll be 4 wins out of 5. It'll obviously be also 4 wins out of 6 races this season.
Won every race is finished, doesn't he?
Yeah.
If this stays the same.
And how ominous is that, I suppose, is my question. Because, again, he's won today, but Leclerc had this race under control.
Yeah, and it's a question of reliability. Reliability is one of the reasons Verstappen wasn't running away with this championship. Now reliability, one of the reasons that Charles Leclerc is not running away with this championship. So getting that side of your team operations right is absolutely key, and as key as any performance you can bring to the car.
Jenny?
Just thinking about when that tailwind hit him at turn 4, right at the beginning of this race, and he spun, didn't he? And that was a huge... What he must have been thinking at that point when his Red Bull is spinning away, he must have thought, there's no way, this is drifting away. And then to hear that Leclerc's got problems, and his DRS flat for Max Verstappen has been an issue this race. I feel like this is a lucky weekend for Verstappen. He's got a lot out of this, more than I think he would have expected.
Well, I guess my other question to that is, we've seen how much Sainz is struggling getting passed by Hamilton and dropping down the field. Verstappen was only, 10 seconds behind Leclerc at one point. Okay, it ended up being 12 or 13 because he got stuck behind George Russell. But was he actually out of the running at that point? Or were Ferrari in sort of so much tyre trouble over the rest of the Grand Prix that he might have still had a shout?
We may have done. Sorry, Jenny. I guess the one caveat to that is that the pressure was taken off Leclerc at that stage. He didn't have to really fight for it, did he? He had nobody chasing him down behind, so he could have run his car a little easier and looked after those tyres a little better.
Also worth saying that Leclerc gets on with his Ferrari much better than Sainz, and I think he can hold that car and control it and look after the tyres more than Sainz can. So it doesn't surprise me that Sainz has struggled maybe more than Leclerc would have done.
Less than 25 minutes now till kick-off in the final day of the Premier League season. We've only got 3 laps to go here in the Spanish Grand Prix, and as soon as we're done, we'll be heading back to Chappers and everybody all the way around the grounds and around the country this afternoon for the title deciding afternoon of action in the Premier League. We're on lap 64 of 66, so 2.5 laps to go for Max Verstappen before he surely wins another Grand Prix, but another win from a Leclerc pole position, because that's the scenario we're in now. Verstappen will have had 4 race wins from 1 pole position. Leclerc will have had 2 race wins from 4 pole positions, so a real picture is starting to emerge. Here's Hamilton's radio.
So we'll do as much lift and coast as possible. This is a DNF risk, so if we have to give up the place, then we'll have to do that, so avoid full load. This is a DNF risk.
Hamilton's in big trouble here. Sainz is right behind him.
More lift and coast, you look better. It's a DNF risk, so the more you can fit in, the better it is.
Both Hamilton and Russell, with 2.5 laps to go, are having to slow down, and here comes Carlos Sainz to try and get back past Hamilton coming into turn 10. Now they're asking them to lift and coast, which basically means when you get to the end of the straight, you have to come off the throttle and just roll the car into the corner. Like when you're coming up to, you shouldn't do this, but if you're coming up to a roundabout and you just whack the clutch in like 100 meters before you get there, obviously that is against highway code regulations. Don't do it, and I don't do it either. But if one were to do that, that's kind of what lift and coasting is. You're just sort of rolling into the corner rather than braking at the last possible minute. Here comes Carlos Sainz on the back of Lewis Hamilton, and Sainz is going to cruise through easily back up into 4th place. Real shame there. The crowd love it, they don't care. But Mercedes, are they running out of fuel basically?
Well, the main reasons you want to lift and coast are either to save fuel, because when you're lifting and coasting and just cruising into the corner, then you're not burning fuel at the same rate, but also it could be temperatures, it could be things getting too hot, and lifting and coasting just takes a little bit of that pressure off. It could be all manner of different things, but fuel saving is often the main reason for lifting and coasting. I wonder if, given this how close we are to the end, whether they've got their calculations a tiny bit wrong.
Well, the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson reporting that it's a water leak on both engines. So what would that? Why would that?
Well, if you've got a water
they're
leak,
there for overheating.
Yeah, if you've got a water leak, you definitely run very, very quickly into overheating issues, and that won't take very long at all to manifest itself. So that's why the DNF risk is posed. Once it overheats, your engine will go pop very, very quickly. So can they nurse these two Silver Mercedes round as the final lap begins to get to the checkered flag?
Max Verstappen is already a third of the way around this final lap. He's 14 seconds ahead of Sergio Perez. It's then 15 seconds back to George Russell and 15 seconds to Carlos Sainz. So we'll see. Bottas might have a chance at getting Hamilton here. Depends how slowly the Mercedes have to go on this final lap. One man who has not been going slowly all day, well, apart from the time he spun and ended up in the gravel trap and was trying to get out of there, but that's Max Verstappen. Nearly threw away a strong position, but it's come back in his favour nevertheless. Pitted early in order to get ahead of George Russell after his DRS wasn't working and was struggling to make the overtake on the Mercedes driver. But ever since Charles Leclerc retired from the Grand Prix, it looked like there was only going to be one man who was going to win it. It's going to be 4 races out of 6 at the start of this season. The reigning champion and the Red Bull squad have struggled with reliability, but no such troubles today. Verstappen through the final corner. He wins the Spanish Grand Prix, and for the first time this season moves to the top of the championship with his main rival Charles Leclerc retiring from the race. Verstappen wins in Barcelona, and it's a Red Bull 1-2. Sergio Perez coming across the line in second position. Hamilton and Russell look as though they are going to make it to the end. Perez crosses the line in second place. George Russell will be coming through to take another podium finish, his second of the season, and remains the only driver to have finished in the top 5 at every Grand Prix. Good drive from Russell.
Really solid drive from Russell. The big question, I guess, is with both Mercedes struggling towards the end just to keep their cars alive, if it is a water leak and if overheating is one of the consequences of that, is it going to cause longer-term damage to the engines in the back of both of those cars, which, as we know, if it does and they need changing, could potentially incur penalties.
Verstappen wins the Spanish Grand Prix. Perez second, Russell third, Carlos Sainz fourth, Hamilton finishes in fifth, Bottas, Ocon, Norris, Alonso and Tsunoda the rest of the top 10. But Verstappen's win moves him to the top of the championship.
Wow. Sometimes you've got to do it the hard way. Well done, Max.
Not an easy start to the race, but we turned it around at the end. So, yeah, very good job also for the team. Really good result. And also thank you to Checo. He's a great teammate.
Well done, mate. Very sorry about that DRS today. I know we made life a bit difficult for you, but you had great pace and yeah, great recovery after that moment at turn 4. So great 1-2 for the team.
Another 1-2 to follow on from Imola. Not a huge amount of 1-2s in Red Bull's history, which surprised me when I look back at it after Imola. But now they've got 2 in 5 races, and Verstappen winning. Behind the top 10 in the order I just read out was Vettel in 11th, Ricciardo 12th, Gasly 13th, Mick Schumacher 14th, 15th for Lance Stroll, 16th for Nicholas Latifi, 17th Kevin Magnussen, 18th Alex Albon. Joe and Leclerc out of the Grand Prix. Sergio Perez took the fastest lap, so that means it is going to be, what, a 6-point lead for Verstappen at the top of the championship now, heading to Monaco, where you have to say, without wanting to look too far ahead, but flying Thursday morning, so I need to start packing. Here's Perez's radio.
Thank you for everything in that race.
I'm happy for the team, but we need to speak later.
Yep.
Perez saying we need to speak later, but I'm happy for the team. But Ferrari have to be favourites for Monaco, right?
Well, if you look at the strengths and weaknesses of the Ferrari versus the Red Bull has excellent straight line speed. It means it can deliver that speed with less downforce and therefore less drag. But Monaco is a circuit that's all about downforce, and that is where the Ferrari has its biggest strength right now. So on paper, it looks like that, but we know how Monaco goes. It's as much about driver confidence, getting your driver in the right zone, delivering absolute perfection lap after lap, as much as it is with any sort of car performance. So anything can happen, but yes, on paper it might look like a Ferrari circuit coming up next.
And you can hear the Monaco Grand Prix here on, well, not here because now we're on Sports Extra, but you can hear it over on 5 Live next weekend, and the BBC Sounds app and the BBC Sport website and all the places you can usually listen to us next weekend. Perez and Verstappen return to the pit lane. Verstappen hauls himself out of his Red Bull after what was a pretty entertaining Spanish Grand Prix, I must say. By Spanish Grand Prix standards, that was very enjoyable, plenty of drama, but Verstappen wins again. Pumps his fists on the top of the car, waves to the crowd, and immediately goes, and with quite a lot of pace, dives into his mechanics. What is that? Is that it always, you must have been in those mechanic scrums where you get jumped on. It always
headbutted a lot with crash helmets. Yeah,
it always looks horrible. Why do people want to do it?
Yeah.
You don't mind at the time then?
You're overcome with emotion, and it really doesn't matter, but it hurts.
Really? Who's giving you the biggest headbutt?
Oh, Kimmy every time. Yeah.
Did you ever think maybe it was on purpose? Did you ever think like, Kimmy, why was every race I'm the one who gets headbutted?
Not very often Kimmy gets that emotional, is it? But every now and again he'd leap up into the crowd. It was a rare occurrence, but it hurts when it happens.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't really consider the regularity at which Kimi Räikkönen was crowd surfing with the gang, but the team all high-fiving, and George Russell with a podium finish in third place. I mean, he was fourth on the grid, so a third place finish is not sort of utterly remarkable, but he had a good race today and showed some really good racecraft in that fight with Verstappen in particular.
I think he would be, for me, a contender for driver of the day. He drove a really solid race under so much pressure at times, but once again he's delivered for that team. Continues his run of finishing in the top 5 at every Grand Prix, and a podium for him, which I think is a sign of not only how good he is, but also a sign of where Mercedes are at now. This could start to become a regular occurrence, and the top 2 teams, if we're going to say that's Red Bull and Ferrari, will definitely have to start looking over their shoulder at what sort of performance Mercedes is going to bring race to race.
We will be with the Grand Prix for another 10 minutes here on Sports Extra before we go to Vicky Sparks at Anfield. So we are going to hear from the top 3, first of all, Verstappen, Perez and George Russell, starting with Russell, and they're talking to Pedro de la Rosa, the Spanish Grand Prix driver of yesteryear.
George, well done. What a race, man. Back on the podium. Can we say Mercedes is back now?
I'd love to say that, but today was very tough. I gave it everything I could, and to hold Max off, he did an amazing job. And just so proud to be standing here. The guys have worked so hard, so this is to everyone back in Brackley and Brixworth. Thank you.
We heard at one point that you were having overheating issues, and you couldn't push as much as you could. I mean, how much did it hamper you?
I heard us a lot, to be honest, but when I had the Red Bulls in my mirrors, all I was doing was my maximum to keep them behind, and it was in an enjoyable, good couple of laps, and just pleased to be able to bring it home. P3, a lot of points on the board for us, so well done to Max. He did a great job.
Well done, man. And tell us about the last few races. Could you push full, or did the car have still overheating issues? Because we saw with Luis that he had to back off.
Yeah, it was very difficult in the last few laps. It was a survival race when we knew we had the gap, and as I said, just proud to bring it home in P3, and thanks to all the fans here. They've been amazing all weekend, and the support at Formula 1 at the moment is in an incredible place, so it's great to be here at the moment.
Well done, you did so well, man. Thank you. Hey Max, well done. Hey, your first victory again since 2016 here in Spain. We saw you having issues in turn 14 with the DRS. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, of course I went off. I suddenly had a lot of tailwind, so I just lost the rear, went off, and then of course I was in the train and I tried to pass, but my DRS was not always working. So that made it very tough. But we managed to, due to the strategy, to get ahead again and do our own race and eventually win the race. So difficult beginning, but a good end.
And when you switch to a 3-stopper, I mean, without DRS or with the DRS not working that well, I mean, how did you manage to overcome that?
Yeah, I tried to stay focused. Of course, it's not nice when stuff like that happen, but at the end, of course, very happy to win, and also very happy for Checo. It was a great result for the team.
Your pace with a soft tire was amazing. I mean, at one point you were the fastest by a country mile. Did the soft tires work very well with you, with your car?
Yeah, I think so. I think the behavior of the car was good on the soft, but also on the medium, I think it was working quite well. So, great.
And on the fight with George, I mean, we saw you a bit of frustrated at one point. I mean, he was closing the door, he was changing direction a bit too late.
Yeah, it was more because of my DRS, but yeah, at the end we managed to get ahead.
Great, man. Well done. Checo, hey, man, you are Mexican, but we're in Spain, so you are half Spain. I mean, half Spanish now. Can we say that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you obviously have two good drivers, but I've been feeling a lot of support this weekend, so I'm extremely happy to be on the podium for the first time in the Spanish Grand Prix.
Man, 1-2 for Red Bull here in Spain. Amazing to be here in the podium. You could have won, though.
Yes, I think it was close, but at the end it's a great team result, and I'm happy for that.
I mean, we heard you on the radio at one point saying, "Let me attack George. I can get through." I mean, were you a bit frustrated at that point?
Yeah, we were on different tire strategies at the time. I let Max by in the beginning, then I thought at the time that I could go by and not lose crucial seconds, to make my strategy work. But anyway, it's a good team result.
Man, great team player. Well done.
And really, he is a great team player, Sergio Perez. I think everybody here at the Spanish Grand Prix cheered him extra loud because he really took one for the team there. It could have been his race win, but he moved aside and let Max Verstappen, and you can hear the Verstappen fans in the background, go through and take the race win. And Jack Nicholls, a crucial, pivotal moment in the championship that Verstappen manages the race win whilst Leclerc collects no points at all.
Well, these are the weekends on which championships are built, aren't they? Those huge swings. You remember the iconic 2018 German Grand Prix where Sebastian Vettel's leading and is about to extend his lead in the championship, and then suddenly he's in the wall and he's out of the Grand Prix and Hamilton gets ahead, and that was that huge swing. Today has been a huge swing, 19 points behind to 6 points ahead, and it was huge, and it was helped by so many other things for Verstappen as well, because maybe if Sainz doesn't have his spin, he's stuck behind that particular Ferrari and can't get past as well. So even if Leclerc doesn't retire, it could have been a Ferrari 1-2 today, like fairly plausibly. So the way these races work out is always interesting.
Mark, there will be discussions after this, won't there, between Sergio Perez and Red Bull, but
will there?
What he's signed up for. He will have those discussions, but he will. Well, what will he be told?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it kind of depends what he came into this job, what expectations he had, what he was told. Often drivers come in and they are categorically told there is no number one, no number two, whereas in other teams we know that it's even written into contracts in some circumstances. I think Sergio Perez knows what his role is at Red Bull Racing. He was on the brink of sort of falling out of Formula One when they offered him the job. I think he's taken this on knowing what he's getting into. So whilst he's frustrated right now, I'm sure it'll all shake itself out later on. But this was a day that's full of emotion from Red Bull right across the board. Max made a mistake. Max's team made a mistake in that their DRS wasn't working. Max was shouting at them at one point. Then we've got the drivers arguing amongst themselves about one letting the other pass. I think there's quite a lot to unpick from a Red Bull point of view at the end of today.
Yeah.
We can unpick it all with the Checkered Flag podcast. We'll be recording that in a few moments' time, so make sure you subscribe and download it. Vicky Sparks is standing by in just a moment. It is the final day, of course, of the football season. Lots of drama to come on all of the BBC Radio Network and the website, so we'll keep you up to speed with all of that. But the drivers taking to the podium now, waving their hands. You have to also say a really good recovery drive from Lewis Hamilton. Finished P5 in the end, but Mercedes understandably very happy with today's result.
Yeah, well, when Hamilton had that moment and sort of wanted to park it up, the team said, no, you can get P8. And normally, I don't know, maybe you don't, maybe this is just how I roll, but I would always just oversell, and you'd say, Lewis, we can get back to P4, and then you'd be interested. They told him P8, and I don't know, if I was Hamilton, I'd probably be like, I don't care. Let's still park it then. I don't need. Yeah. Why do I need 4 points in the championship? Come on, guys. Let's go and have a bit of sangria. But to get back up to fifth and what could have been fourth was really impressive. And the thing for me was Russell stayed in the fight with Perez kind of the whole time. Even though Perez got ahead of him with the tyre offset, even after that, Russell was able to stay with him. So I think they are getting to the point where I don't think they can race Verstappen and Leclerc, but I think they're getting to the point where they might be able to nibble a bit of Sainz and nibble a little bit of Perez.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points there. I think Lewis Hamilton, of course, at the start of the race, when he was on the radio, was saying, look, let's park it up so we can save the engine. Those were his words. I wonder if they can actually save that engine now. They had an issue at the end of the race, potentially a water leak. Now, if that does start to overheat, they were talking about a potential DNF. That could be an engine loss, potentially.
Yeah.
Let's wait and see. And the other is, that's a great lesson to all kids out there. Never, ever give up.
Lesson of the day, Mark Priestley. I love it.
That's the lesson for Liverpool.
Yeah, there's still light at the end of the tunnel. Just maybe. There'll be a lot of people hoping there are, certainly. Remember, it's Monaco next weekend, so not much time for these teams to turn things around and get back into the swing of things. It's a track where Ferrari go well. Last year, there was heartbreak for Charles Leclerc. He had to retire before the race even began from pole position. So let's see what he can do this year round, and if he can rebound from the heartbreak that has been the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, I do stats when it comes to Formula One, so I've got my football stat ready for Vicky Sparks.
Here we go.
She'll know it because it's a pretty obvious one, but it's the first time in 10 years that the title, top four and relegation battles all happen on the last day of the season. So it's all lined up to be amazing. It's a sea of red here for Carlos Sainz, who didn't quite get on the podium. Will it be a sea of red at the end of this next
Jenny.
2 hours? Vicky Sparks. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live, and it's over to you.
Jenny and the team, thank you so